Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
It was early spring outside. The snow was just beginning to melt, but all the puddles were already in streams, around which the children were running merrily, shouting and laughing. They all had paper boats, and some were floating real wooden boats made by their fathers or grandfathers on the weekend. Near a large tree, from which large drops of melting snow were falling, stood a tall for her age girl of 8. She looked longingly in front of her. She didn't have a boat. Her mom was at work, so she couldn't make one, and the girl had no one else, not even friends. They had recently moved to a new house, and she hadn't had time to get to know anyone, but she loved to go out. But it's hard to have fun when everyone is playing and laughing, and no one wants you. Molly sighed and pouted her lips in resentment. On a bench a little away from the brooks and trees sat a short old man with gray tangled hair and a gray-brown cotton jacket. On his feet were very shabby boots that must have been cold. He looked at the children with a smile, then shifted his gaze to the girl and lowered his head sadly. After a few seconds, some idea came to the old man's mind. He jumped up from the bench and rushed somewhere towards the house. He knocked on the door, and a stout, tall woman with a ladle in her hands came out onto the porch. She asked the old man something menacingly, but when he explained what he wanted, she shook her head and went into the house. After a few seconds, she returned with a piece of paper. The old man nodded gratefully and returned to his bench. He began to roll the paper into the shape of a ship. He was doing it very strangely, in a special way, and even managed to attract the girl's attention. It should be recognized that this old man was one of those who, with his kindness and charm, could attract people to his side. He was helped by everyone to whom he turned for help, whether he managed to relieve them, or he could choose such people who would not refuse help. No one knew, but everyone helped, and he never refused if he was asked for anything. Christina, who lived in a house on the edge of the street, was an old and infirm old woman. She was so weak that sometimes she couldn't carry heavy bags home, but Gary, the old man, was always there to help. Christina often brought cutlets or soup to his semblance of a house in an abandoned school building. Molly watched the old man with interest as he rolled up the ship. When he finally finished, he smiled kindly at the girl and beckoned her over to him. Molly's mom was always telling her not to approach strangers because they could hurt her or take her away from her mom, and Molly had always obeyed her mother's instructions, but not now. The old man's good-natured smile, curiosity, and desire to play with everyone made her head for the bench. The old man silently handed the girl a small snow-white ship made of thick paper, almost cardboard. It was unusual, not like the others, big with sails and a mast. Molly did not know that such a thing could be made from an ordinary piece of paper. Her eyes lit up, and she looked at the old man as if he were the wizard Goodwin from the story she had read last weekend. The old man nodded at the creek, near where the children were playing, and smiled again. The smile lit up Molly's face, and she ran off to play with the others, as if this ship was a ticket to a world of friendship and children's games. Contrary to her wish, the girl did not put the ship on the water. She felt sorry for it. She ran with the boys, refused to exchange with the boys who offered their handicrafts. Molly had gotten attention and a willingness to play with her. She didn't need more. She turned to see that old man again, but he wasn't there. The bench was empty. Molly looked sadly at the ship and ran home. She would definitely keep it, no other way, because it was a gift from a real wizard. At home, Molly waited impatiently for her mother, who had to come from work in the evening, about 5 o'clock. The girl was so impatient to tell about the ship that she forgot to eat and did not even turn on her favorite cartoons, which went only on Saturdays and only at this time. She kept running to the window to see her mother's red coat or her blue beret, but her mother was delayed somewhere. When the clock hand went past 5, Molly began to worry. She would not leave the window. Tears almost came to her eyes. She remembered that Daddy had also failed to show up once, and she was afraid that it would happen again. But luckily, this time her fears were in vain. Molly's mom, Jennifer, came a half hour after the promised time. Molly threw herself on her neck, not even allowing her to put the bags on the floor and take off her shoes. "What's wrong?" Jennifer exclaimed. "I thought you weren't coming as Daddy." Almost sobbing, the girl said, "Sweetie." Jennifer hugged her daughter and squatted down. Molly, like most children, was often dramatic, but she was quite resilient. Her grudges for the rest of her life usually ended after a series of her favorite cartoons or after a scoop of ice cream bought especially for her. Now she wiped away her tears with her sleeve and smiled broadly. "Look what I have!" the girl shouted and ran off to her room. Jennifer smiled and shook her head, trying to get her boots off before her daughter arrived. Molly came running in just a few seconds later and held out a snow-white craft to her mother. Jennifer took it in her hands and bowed her head. She scrutinized it carefully and came across an embossed inscription. It was almost illegible, but there it was. The woman awed and backed away, not knowing what to say. "Honey, where did you get it?" Molly shrugged her shoulders. "The old man on the bench, he made it for me." "What did he look like?" Molly wondered. She wasn't good at describing people, so she could only name clothes. Jennifer handed her daughter the grocery bags and asked her to sort through them, and went to her room. She sat down tiredly on her bed and sighed. She couldn't believe her eyes and still thought she had imagined it. Jennifer reached into her locker and pulled out an old shoebox from there. She carefully removed the lid with trembling fingers and exhaled noisily. She hadn't had to open the cherished box in years. It was filled with junk, as anyone who opened a shoebox would say. But for Jennifer, it was the only thing that bound her to her quiet parents. Or rather, so she thought. Jennifer's mom, Susan, was indeed dead, having died of cancer when the girl was 13. Her father, on the other hand, had gone missing 3 years earlier. At 13, Jennifer was left alone, the benefit of being raised by an aunt, Jenna's father's sister. She was younger than her brother, unmarried, and belonged to the type of people who believed that nothing could be better than freedom. So she never restricted her niece in anything. However, her upbringing too, she was not engaged, preferring to write memoirs, go to modeling shoots, and celebrate contracts with her lovers, which were at least 6 for the time that Jennifer lived with her. Except only the last one had lingered for 2 years, along with her son Michael. Jenna had never treated her niece with warmth or anything like that. She just didn't care for the girl. Occasionally she would walk into her room, look at Jennifer aloofly, nod her thoughts, and leave. At 18, she subtly began to hint that it was time for her niece to do the honors, or she would be too long in someone else's house. From then on, Jennifer started living on her own. She had been working part-time before, saving money for the future, and now she began to live on her own. 16 years ago, a 13-year-old girl sat on a narrow bed with flowered sheets. She was holding a ship made of paper. It had masts and sails and did not look at all like the ones children played with on the street. She looked sadly at the ship, her hand trembling. "What are you doing with this toy? You are not 5 years old." Rolling her eyes, asked Jenna, who leaned against the door and looked at her niece. She was a tall and thin woman with long curly hair and a very pretty face. The woman preferred to wear expensive brand-name clothes and put on good makeup. Jennifer, as a child, often heard from her mother that it was unknown where she got the money for all this from. She never had a normal job, occasionally selling her graphomaniacal writings to publishers and receiving modest money for photo shoots as a model. "My dad made me this." Coping with her emotions, the girl replied and hid the ship in a small shoebox that stood next to her. When the lid was in place, Jennifer clutched the box to her chest. "Your father hasn't been with you for 3 years now. There's no telling where he is." Jenna shrugged her shoulders. "It's about time you started living your own life. Even though your mother, it didn't work out." Jennifer looked at her aunt with hatred and clenched her teeth. A storm of emotions rose at her because of mentioning her mother in such a negative way. The girl realized that she shouldn't quarrel with her aunt, with whom she would have to live for a long time, but she wasn't going to listen to such statements about her mother. "This is the memory of him. Only he made ships like this, I know, because no one else had them. He'd leave his signature by crumpling the sheet in a special way. Would you like me to show you?" Jenna raised her hands, shook her head, dismissed me from looking at the old paper. John was always scribbling something when he had nothing to do and sticking it to others. The look Jennifer directed at her aunt startled the woman. She chose to remove herself from the small room, leaving the girl alone with her thoughts. There could be no mistake. It was indeed the same ship. The side was crumpled and stamped with the same illegible letters as on the old yellowed piece of paper. Jennifer folded the 2 ships and closed her eyes. "What if I'm just making this up to myself?" The woman shook her head. For over 19 years, nothing had been heard from her father. It was as if he had fallen through the earth, and now, after all this time, Jennifer was seeing the same ship. What if it was just a coincidence? But Jennifer didn't believe in coincidence. She believed in fate. Maybe it was her desire to have at least one loving relative, except for her daughter, of course. But she was too young to confide her worries to her. Jennifer had never been an optimist, quite the opposite. Life didn't give her moments to believe in miracles or happy endings. First her father disappeared, then her mother died, and she was taken in by a self-obsessed aunt. At 19, it seemed that life was finally starting to get better when a young girl was in law school, she got a boyfriend, and they started living together. Then it seemed that everything would always be fine. But fate, or evil doom, never left Jennifer, only gave her a little respite. And now, years later, in her life again happened grief, the usual familiar grief. The woman was glad she had her daughter, but she was very afraid for her. Molly, in essence, was all Jennifer had left. And the tiny chance that her father was still alive had lit a long-lost hope in Jennifer's long-lost soul into a faint flame. "Molly?" shouted the woman, removing the box. She had never shown it to anyone, ever, after that day at Jenna's house. It seemed to be something private and intimate, something to be hidden and not given to anyone. "Honey, come here." Molly ran into the room, her face smeared with flour, certainly not escaping her mother's scrutinizing gaze. Jennifer looked at her daughter with that maternal look that made it impossible to lie. Lowering her eyes, Molly confessed, "I dropped the flour." "The whole packet?" Jennifer gasped, remembering that she had wanted to make cheesecakes this morning. "Why'd you get soaked?" "I thought I could clean it up before you got home." "Kids," the mother thought and shook her head. For a second the heavy thoughts disappeared from her head, and she looked at her daughter with a smile. Molly was the only ray of light in her life, and she wasn't ready to lose it either. "Okay, let's deal with the flour. You better tell me, where was that old man who made you the boat?" Molly sighed and tried to explain the place. Jennifer had grown up in this town, so she knew the streets and nooks and crannies well, but even she had a hard time understanding the place from her daughter's clumsy and somewhat awkward description. The garages next to the mini village? Jennifer shrieked when she finally realized. Molly shrugged. If that's not them, I've completely forgotten the town. Molly didn't understand half of what her mother was saying, so she just nodded and pulled her by the hand into the kitchen. Come on, I'm hungry. Oh, you've been hungry all day. Will you have rice and a cutlet? The girl nodded and rushed into the kitchen. But let's get the flour out of the way first. Jennifer grinned. A heavy sigh sounded on the cool spring street, close to a small settlement. Or rather, it was not really a settlement, but a part of the city where private houses were preserved. When the center and most of the districts were given for the construction of high-rise buildings, the inhabitants of this part of the city refused, and there remained a settlement of private houses. It was very small, but because of the heavy traffic and the large amount of trees, it was frequented by teenagers in the evenings and children during the day. Jennifer had no idea how her 8-year-old daughter had found the settlement when it was quite a long way from their apartment. The place greeted the woman with familiar fresh air and a view that hadn't changed at all. It was worth saying in the 10 years she had been out of town, the township hadn't changed the most. If in the city there were new stores, buildings, schools, and kindergartens, here stood the old grocery store, where probably still worked a tall, full Clara, who never tied her blue apron. Jennifer and her friends often ran behind the garages or sat on the village's shriveled playground. Besides, there were a lot of abandoned houses here, just a teenager's paradise. There were streams and puddles everywhere, but Jennifer remembered the way to the garages. She knew she wasn't likely to find anything there, but it was worth a try. Then she intended to ask around. In a place like this, everyone knew each other. Really? Jennifer grinned. The garages hadn't changed at all, except a little more dreary than they had been 10 years ago, and they were still standing close together. There was a path in the middle that teenagers ran around on, and one garage had an old 9-wheeler on it. No one knew how it had gotten there, but it had been there since before Jennifer had moved in with her aunt. Out of the corner of her eye, Jennifer could see the bench where the old man was sitting, according to Molly's stories, and in the distance there was an old oak tree, its branches spreading out for many meters, where the girl was standing. Jennifer looked around more carefully, hoping to find some hint of the old man who had made the boat. "Girl, you shouldn't stand where cars drive." A loud, very sonorous male voice sounded behind her. Jennifer turned indignantly toward the man and opened her mouth to say what she thought, but she failed. "Michael, you?" "How?" Standing in front of the woman was her long-time and not the most pleasant acquaintance. He could be categorized as the type of memory you don't really want to remember. Tall, blonde, and very pompous. Oh gods, how much Jennifer wanted him gone like her father had once been, without a trace. It had been her ultimate dream at 16. To meet him now was a complete surprise to the thoughtful woman. "I live here, but how did you end up here? That's the question." The man grinned. Michael was a year older than Jennifer, but had been in the same grade as her because of his father's many moves. He was in the military. A year after Susan, Jennifer's mom, died, Jenna had gotten together with Michael's dad, and the boy had moved in with them. Or rather, he moved in with Jennifer, because he lived the next 2.5 years with her in the same room. It had been a bloody, awful 2.5 years. Jennifer preferred never to remember them. 13 years ago, a tall, blonde-haired guy flies into the room and throws his backpack right on the floor. It's light, hardly any textbooks in it, but it hits the leg of a girl who's sitting at her desk trying to do her homework. It's worth saying, Jennifer has always studied hard, tried to get good grades, but lately, because of having a named roommate, she moved out to study, so she had to do her homework when no one was in the apartment. Michael liked to hang out after school with his buddies. How many times do I have to ask you not to throw things in the room? The girl asked angrily, not turning around. She had already started looking for her old headphones to isolate herself from Michael's chatter. Yes, it was his favorite thing to do, talking while Jennifer was doing her homework. He pissed her off all the time. This is my room, too, Prickle, and you need to stop worrying about order like this apartment is yours. Jennifer couldn't take it anymore and turned to face the guy. You know, no matter where you are, throwing things on the floor, talking loudly all night, is unacceptable anywhere. Michael grinned and tossed a tattered tennis ball from one hand to the other. You're too right, Petite. We're 9 months apart. The girl mouthed offensively and went back to her algebra homework. The headphones were finally plugged in, and Jennifer could no longer hear Michael's annoying, mosquito-like voice. Not long after that day, Jennifer lost her headphones. More correctly, they were ruined by Michael, who was tired of the girl ignoring his words. Jennifer even cried then. And now, many years later, Jennifer stood in the garages and looked at that same annoying and nasty face. Of course, they weren't children anymore, and Jennifer had long since become a mother herself, but childhood resentments don't just go away. That made her feel a kind of nasty suffocation on her soul, as if an encounter had occurred that she didn't want. In spite of her feelings, however, Jennifer smiled. I've recently moved here. Michael shifted his gloves into another pocket and grinned. I thought you had an apartment downtown, didn't you? I sold it. Jennifer replied briefly, and no, I don't want to talk about what happened. The man grinned, the familiar dimples appearing on his face. He was standing quite far away, but even from that distance Jennifer could see the familiar light in his eyes. Do you want to come in? I don't live far from here. Michael asked, or do you have something to do? Next time I will, but now I have 44 minutes left before my shift starts, and I have to find the homeless man the 8-year-old kid described. Michael's eyes widened as he looked at the woman in surprise and grinned again. He didn't seem to understand anything, but he was insanely curious. Who was the homeless guy? Jennifer didn't know if she should answer Michael, because she never liked him and only did nasty things to him, but she judiciously described the situation briefly. She was moved to this act by the realization that without the help of a local, to find the old man will be very difficult. Besides, Michael, like her, was an adult. It's foolish to lose a chance to find a possible father because of childhood resentments. So you're looking for the man who made your daughter's boat. I won't ask why, but I can't help you yet. I just bought a garage here, so I don't know anything or anybody. But I'll be sure to ask around and see if anyone knows anything. Jennifer nodded gratefully. She hadn't expected to be so lucky. It was the first time fate had taken pity on her, it seemed. Considering it was Michael, though. Give me the number? Said Michael, and Jennifer looked at him uncomprehendingly. I'll call you if I can find it, or do you want me to pigeonhole you? No, said a hurt Jennifer. There he was, the real Michael, sarcastic and sarcastic. Too bad. The man smiled wryly. In that case, I would have had to get your address. Jennifer held back the urge to reply and handed Michael a business card. He took it and whistled. Juvenile Inspector, Senior Lieutenant Jones Jennifer. Not bad. I never thought you'd be on the police force. I was a specialist in another field, and they only took me here to educate kids. I never thought I'd be doing that. I didn't see myself as a school teacher either. The man laughed and punched the number into his phone. Jennifer opened her eyes wide and gasped. What? No way? You were dumb as a cork. How could you be? Michael rolled his eyes and shook his head. It's been 13 years and you're still as cocky and self-important as ever. Who's to say? Okay, well, if you hear anything, give me a call. Jennifer said hurriedly and left. She didn't say goodbye or anything. The thoughts and feelings of her childhood came flooding back. Yes, someone will probably say that it is strange. They are almost 30 years old. What childhood resentments? But for Jennifer, immersed in her own problems, after the death of her mother and the disappearance of her father, it was the last straw. A spitting aunt, a strange man in the apartment, and him, the man who occupied the girl's room and made her worry almost every day. Because of him, she almost lost her gold medal and had a fight with her aunt, so much so that she threatened to get rid of her niece. It wasn't just a childish grudge, it was something you can't forget. Baby, stay with Aunt Nancy. She'll look after you. Jennifer whispered softly in her daughter's ear. But where are you going so late? Jennifer sighed. She couldn't tell her daughter the truth while it was still early. To work. I got called into work. Molly nodded and hugged her mother. Nancy, I'll pick her up in the morning then so I don't wake you up if anything happens, okay? The tall, thin woman, Jennifer's neighbor, nodded. It wasn't the first time she had stayed with a girl whose mother worked all the time. Raising a child alone, there are a lot of downsides. Jennifer left Nancy's apartment and went about her business. She got into the old car that once belonged to her husband and drove off. At 12:30 at night, the phone rang. On the other side was the slightly agitated voice of a man asking for an urgent call to the abandoned school building. It was Michael. Oh gods! How Jennifer was angry. She just didn't understand what he wanted from her at almost midnight, but he was asking to come urgently, so she sent her daughter to a neighbor's house and went to the school building herself. She'd have to remember where it was. Night roads were a nightmare for the woman. She hated going anywhere in the dark. The fear that still lingered constantly plagued her, but the strange joking messages that came from Michael kept Jennifer going. She just wanted to remember a couple of skills from her self-defense classes and smash his smug nose in for upsetting her daughter and making Jennifer herself drive off halfway through the night, unknowingly to wherever. How angry she was, but there was nothing she could do but clutch the steering wheel with all her might and rid the dumb jokes and the messages from Michael out of the corner of her eye. Jennifer wouldn't be surprised if she arrived at the school building and he was waiting for her with a smile on his face and said he was just bored. The car had to be parked far away from her destination, simply for the reason that the woman didn't know what kind of soil was there. Considering it was spring, there could be both snow and knee-deep water, and that was a best-case scenario. Jennifer climbed out of the car and turned on her flashlight, a good thing she had known to grab one before she left. Trying to remember the way to the abandoned school, she trudged through the mud and snow. Good thing she'd worn shoes that wouldn't get wet. Despite her excellent grades, Jennifer always liked to have fun with her friends. She never lagged behind her girlfriends in relationships, also ran behind the garages, and came home after midnight, drunk. True, it was once or twice. No more. The aunt was to blame. While the other girls sprayed a ton of perfume on themselves and chewed a whole pack of mint gum to cover up the smell of cigarettes and booze, Jennifer had no reason to do that. Jenna didn't care about her. She was immersed in herself and her memoirs. Jennifer wanted to listen to moralizing like the rest of them, wanted to hide the smell and try to get out of the house after midnight, but she couldn't. Jenna herself sometimes asked her why Jennifer didn't drink, invited the Beaumont to her parties, and sometimes suggested her acquaintances as suitors. Because of this, Jennifer would often leave the house or sit with her headphones on. At that time, she and her friends would raid every abandoned house in the neighborhood. Of course, the huge school building didn't go unnoticed. Jennifer's memory did not fail her, and she recognized the exact location of the school. It was a huge, sometimes crumbling building, where once they wanted to make a factory, then a sewing shop, and then they gave up. 10 years ago, the building had been a wreck, and now it seemed to be hanging on by a thread. Jennifer sighed and walked inside. She still couldn't figure out what Michael was doing in this place and why he wanted Jennifer. Once inside, the woman heard the annoying creaking sound the wooden floor made. It was like a sieve, so badly gnawed by mice. There was trash, cigarette butts, and bottles lying everywhere. Jennifer pulled out her cell phone and asked Michael where he was. In response, from somewhere overhead, Michael dedicated the phone. "Tell me why you pulled me out of bed in, Michael?" "Michael?" Jennifer broke into a run, but the man's warning shout stopped her. Michael was hanging from a hole in the floor on the second floor. Apparently, he had fallen through it. He somehow kept his balance and even managed to hold his phone. "The floor is very flimsy. You climb up, you could fall through it yourself," Michael explained, dedicating himself to the floor. Jennifer nodded. She was well aware of that herself. "Why didn't you call the emergency services? You figured that since you got me in here, you'd be the one to get me out." An exasperated sigh echoed throughout the building. "The guys told me about a local homeless guy who lives at the school. They say he walks around, helps everyone, and they give him food and clothes. Are you sure it's him?" Jennifer asked excitedly, and then hesitated. "Okay, I get it. We'll talk about it later. For now, we need to figure out how to get you out. Maybe the emergency services?" Michael didn't have time to answer. The board beneath him began to make a sickening creaking sound. Sure, the height wasn't very high. He'd probably survived the fall, but it wasn't just the height. The first floor was full of beams, metal objects, and such. He fell on them. No ambulance would help. Jennifer awed and threw herself up the stairs. For a second, she was seized by memories she would rather not remember. Of that very day. She couldn't hear Michael screaming. She could only hear the damn boards that were creaking, crunching, and generally making too many noises that just kept the woman from concentrating. She realized the rescue service wasn't going to make it in time. Remembering the lessons of rescuing drowning people, Jennifer flopped to the floor as soon as she heard a creak beneath her. She prayed to God that she wouldn't fall. An image of a daughter who might be alone came to mind, but then another, darker and gloomier Jennifer crawled harder. Carefully pulling off her belt, Jennifer tossed one end to Michael. He tossed his phone back to the ladder and picked up the end of the belt. Jennifer grabbed some kind of beam with her other hand and began to pull. "Don't fly off after me," Michael warned. "I'm not going to." Jennifer parried and pulled again. Michael began to crawl out of the hole, but it was eerily slow, and the floor beneath them buckled harder and harder. The man was apparently stuck, thanks to the thick jacket that helped him not fall, but it was also preventing him from getting out. Jennifer still managed to pull Michael out of his trap. She was sweating and her arm was aching as the floor beneath the man. He slowly crawled towards the flimsy staircase. Jennifer descended to the first floor and sighed, shaking off her clothes and stretching her jacket. "You're insane," Michael pronounced and leaned against the wall. When one frame last year caught, their pirouettes had to do more pirouettes. The woman grinned. A second after she said that, a beam fell a couple of centimeters from where Michael was, fell to the first floor, and broke in two with a crash, and both Jennifer and Michael stood with their eyes wide open. About time. Michael said and exhaled. It could have been me. The angry look the woman threw at the boy was unmatched. For a second, it seemed that Michael would have chosen to go back. Why did you call me instead of the emergency services? Are you sick of living, you idiot? Are you out of your mind? Shouted Jennifer, approaching the man. You're an idiot and a moron. Are you scared for me? Michael asked incredulously. Jennifer was half silent and leaned against the icy stone wall, tears coming to her eyes, but she held back as she always did. I'm losing everyone, she answered hoarsely, and lately it seems like it's my curse. I've lost my mother, my father, my husband. I buried my mother not in front of my children as a grown woman, but when I was 13. I didn't understand what had happened or how it was possible. My father had left my life even earlier, starting a series of these events. I was 10. I didn't even have time to memorize what he looked like. If it wasn't for pictures, I wouldn't have known. And I buried my husband, being not a gray-haired old lady and with hands trembling from old age, but with a child in my arms, with a 7-year-old girl who to this day does not understand why Daddy left her. And Daddy, at the last second of his life, called me, not the emergency services, not the ambulance, but me. A single traitorous tear rolled out of Jennifer's eye, but she brushed it away so quickly that Michael didn't notice. He'd been in an accident. The car had flipped over, warped. It was impossible to get out from inside. He realized this, so he called me and apologized for everything. I was at work and I was interviewing a witness. I was angry that he interrupted me. Then I got a voicemail from him and I wanted to open it, but I got a call from the ambulance. He was driving in the dark late at night and he sent a video of him saying goodbye to his daughter. Jennifer covered her face with her hands and breathed heavily. She couldn't understand why she was saying all this, especially since Michael, truth be told, didn't really care who to tell anymore. In the 8 months that Mason had been gone, Jennifer had never, ever told anyone about her pain. That's why I was scared for you, because I won't suffer another death, much less one caused by me. Michael put his hand on Jennifer's shoulder. I'm sorry, I really am. It was stupid, coming here alone, calling you in. Jennifer raised her eyes to the man and shook her head. I'm just glad you're alive. I'm glad everything turned out okay. Wait. Jennifer's discerning gaze noticed movement in the darkness. It was as if someone was standing there listening. The woman snatched the flashlight from Michael's hands and pointed it into the darkness. A short man with a beard and mustache, wearing an old hat, a fleece jacket, and old boots was looking at her. Jennifer recognized him, just as Molly had described him. Dad? About her father, Jennifer didn't remember much. He was short, shorter than Susan, and even shorter than Jenna. Dad had a tattoo on his forearm and a large scar behind his ear. Jennifer didn't know where he was from, but she remembered her father telling more and more stories about his origins. At first she had believed, eventually she realized she was being lied to. Now an old man with gray hair, a sad, frightened look stood in front of Jennifer, and she couldn't understand at all. Was this her father or not? She took a step forward, but Michael grabbed her arm. Father, what are you talking about? Jennifer waved the man away and walked toward the old man with slow and cautious steps. She was afraid of scaring him. Good evening. My name is Jennifer. And you are? The old man smiled, revealing yellow teeth. They call me Gary. Your father's name was John, wasn't it? Michael asked with his usual sneer. Jennifer rolled her eyes and chose not to answer. Don't you recognize me? I realize it's been 19 years, but 19? The old man asked. so I only remember those years. I didn't count, of course, but about 20 years ago, I woke up in another city in the snow. I didn't remember anything. Gary lowered his head and began to speak hoarsely, as if remembering something he disliked very much. Jennifer listened intently, trying to look at the unfamiliar features of his face. I lived there for a few years, and then I came to this wonderful town by chance. The people here are very kind, not unlike the people in the place where I woke up. They feed me, sing to me, even give me clothes, and it's not a bad place to live. It's chilly in winter, of course, but I've gotten used to it. Shocked at the face and total incomprehension, Jennifer looked at the old man in front of her. She listened to him and she was getting scared. It was as if what he was telling her had happened to her personally. It was so horrible that she took a few slow steps back and leaned against the wall again. Michael touched her shoulder again and nodded, letting her know he was close by. "So you don't remember anything that happened before you woke up in that town?" asked Michael, giving Jennifer time to take a breath. The old man shook his head. "Do you have a tattoo of a ship on your forearm?" Jennifer asked. Gary blurted out a smile as he looked at the girl and rolled up the sleeve of the jacket that was wide to him. "Here it is, right here. Ships, you know, I've always liked them. They're beautiful, you have to admit. It's a pity we don't have a sea to look at this splendor." The air stuck in Jennifer's lungs and wouldn't come out. She looked helplessly at Michael and nodded. The man looked at the old man strangely. There was distrust and suspicion in his gaze. And the crescent-shaped scar behind his ear? Gary shrugged. "I haven't had to look in a mirror in 20 years, ma'am." The old man smacked his lips. Michael approached him and asked him to take off his hat. Behind his ear, there was indeed a big, thick scar like a crescent moon. The man turned to Jennifer and nodded. She couldn't hold back a sigh. Her knees shook so hard it felt like the ground was about to go out from under her feet, and her hands couldn't grasp the phone in her pocket. Someone had texted, however. It didn't care at all right now. Jennifer reached in and pulled out her phone, and from under the case she pulled out an old, tattered picture of her father and mother. They were smiling happily together and looking at the camera. Carefully, Jennifer held out the photo to Michael, who showed it to the old man, dedicating it with a flashlight. "Do you recognize it?" Gary, as usual, shrugged his shoulders. "Not the man, but the woman. She's beautiful. I think I've even dreamed about her sometimes." "Yeah, that's her. I couldn't figure out where I'd seen her, but she comes to me often, talking heresy. No wonder. The cold makes you dream." This is a picture of my parents, Susan and John. 19 years ago, my father went missing. He was short with a tattoo of a ship on his forearm and a scar behind his ear. He made paper ships and gave them away like you gave my daughter's ship. The old man listened to Jennifer in silence, not daring to speak a word against it. On his wrinkled and overgrown face, there was a storm of emotions, from fright to hope. It seemed that he was about to cry. "Do you think I am your father, ma'am?" "Yes," Jennifer answered clearly. "Why didn't you say you were looking for your father?" Michael hissed almost in Jennifer's face. They had talked Gary, or John, into having Michael over to their house for the night and then going to the hospital the next day. Admittedly, it wasn't an option that Michael liked very much, his apartment having been turned into a bed and breakfast. "I wasn't sure." Jennifer shrugged and walked over to the sink to pour water. "I couldn't tell you that maybe my dad was a homeless guy who gave the kids paper boats. I thought I was crazy, and besides, you're not the one to tell. Is it okay to bring him to my house? First of all, you suggested it. Second of all, it's not okay to bring him to my house." Molly would come over in the morning and find a homeless guy smelling like garbage on the couch. Michael nodded. Okay, Jennifer, I get. I have a former neurologist who works at Central Hospital. I'll call in the morning and see what can be done. Yeah, well, you call me. I'll try to get there early. There was a loud sigh. Michael rolled his eyes expressively. Where are you going at 2:00 in the morning? Stay. I've got a great bed and a folding chair. You don't have the girl alone, do you? Jennifer nodded her head. She was very tired and did not even try to refuse Michael's offer. In the few hours she had spent in the place, the hatred and bad memories had faded away somewhere. Maybe it was due to fatigue, or maybe Jennifer finally realized that they were no longer children. Despite the tiredness and even detachment, neither Jennifer nor Michael wanted to sleep. The man made the bed and laid out the couch. At first he tried to walk quietly around his own apartment, but then he realized that Gary was very difficult to wake. It wasn't that surprising, though. He slept in an abandoned building next door to alcoholics. They hardly behaved quietly at night. Jennifer made tea for two. The man came in and plopped tiredly on a bar stool. So what? Why that Dr. the X? Jennifer smiled and sipped her green tea. It should be made clear that Jennifer liked to get off topic with herself. She hated being the center of attention, the reason being that she was afraid. Being always in her aunt's house, more of an appendix to the apartment than a member of it, Jennifer transferred this behavior to the rest of her life. She had almost no friends. Those couple of colleagues from work and former classmates stayed in the neighboring town, where the woman lived for the last 10 years. She didn't make any acquaintances in the new city, and admittedly, she didn't want to. So, for example, with Nancy, Jennifer met by accident, having mixed up the doors of the apartment. In the house where Molly and Jennifer live, not all apartments have a number, because the house was not built so long ago, and not even all the apartments have not yet sold. Those who have already settled in have put numbers on their doors, but Jennifer and Nancy, who have just moved in, have not had time to do so. Late at night, after socializing with one not very polite teenager who had been drinking, Jennifer was coming home and got the wrong apartment door. She banged on Nancy's door for 20 minutes before she called the police. It took the precinct officer a long time to sort out what had happened. Michael grinned and shook his head. Jennifer noticed that he was doing that a little too often lately. Do you care about that? Jennifer shrugged and took another sip of her tea. It was hot and flowed pleasantly through her body. Only now it was clear how tired, cold, and scared she was. It was a bad match. Jennifer laughed. Who better than me to know that it's almost impossible to get along with you? Michael smiled. But that phrase is almost always an excuse. So what happened? Did you cheat on her? No, of course not. The man brushed it off. It's just that she wanted children. All her life she dreamed of a lavish wedding and a family, and I was 22. I'd just gotten back from the army and admittedly wasn't going to have kids for the next couple of years. Of course, we tried to live together, to stop fighting, but in the end she left. Michael smiled sadly and sipped his tea. No sugar. Remember, it felt good. It's hard to forget, I used to run into the kitchen and make you tea 5 times a day because you were lazy. Maybe I liked you taking care of me. No, you just liked messing with me. Jennifer grinned, leaning back against the wall. While Michael was gone, she had time to look around the apartment a little and was generally surprised. Despite the outside clutter, it was clean. The one-bedroom apartment resembled the one Jennifer had lived in with Jenna. A large room, a living room, and a small bedroom. The kitchen was surprisingly done up in very nice modern colors, with a tall table and a few bar stools. It wasn't hard to tell that the man lived here alone, though. There was one pan on the stove, one plate and fork in the sink, and one cup on the countertop. Jennifer had to work hard to find the other cup. So what's your ex-girlfriend's name? I figured you just don't want to talk about your dad, right? Okay, I'll play along. Her name was Mary, and it is. She's a lovely girl, a great neurologist, and probably a good wife, and she's also a mother. She had a son a few years ago, and surprisingly, I became his godfather. No way! I always thought it was hard to keep good relationships with exes. How would I know, though? My husband was my only partner, and he died. How tragic and pathetic. He died and I stayed. It's weird to start a new one. Do you have someone in mind? Isn't there a young English teacher in the school? Michael grimaced. Wendy? She's still working. Jennifer stepped forward and opened her eyes in surprise. No way. She's 90? 82 turned 82 at the beginning of the year. Gods, she's still telling stories about what it was like in England in '56. Jennifer couldn't stop laughing. It seemed like someone had jammed the on button. I can't understand how you got to school. Laughing back, Jennifer said, I could never associate you with a teacher. Other than a felon, did you ever associate me with anyone at all? With a smile at the corner of his lips, Michael asked. The silence was more eloquent than any phrase. Jennifer had never really seen Michael as a good person, never thought he would become anything more than a class bully. There was a time when there was no work at all. His father had finally drank himself into oblivion, started to lose his mind. Yes, Michael was shifting a mug of tea from hand to hand. There was nothing to live on, and my neighbor worked at the school as a vice principal. She retroactively enrolled me in some pedagogical courses, and in September, she got me a job as a teacher. Hodabich had just retired. They called Hodabich an old history teacher who wore a long beard and was bald. Surprisingly, I liked it. The salary, of course, is not great, but you can live. I graduated as a history teacher, and now I have 2 jobs and classroom management. Jennifer and Michael talked a little more about other things, about work, family, and the past, though they mentioned the past only in passing, trying not to talk about how they felt about each other. Jennifer, for the first time in years, closed the gestalt of resentment over what she thought was a spoiled childhood. Thank you, the woman said as she and Michael went to bed. The man gave her a perplexed look for keeping the conversation going and keeping me out of it. He didn't let me think about what was going on with me and my father. You're welcome. Michael replied simply and succinctly. I've always done that. I'm not used to it. What are you talking about? Jennifer asked, confused. When we lived at Aunt Jenna's house, it happened a lot. She'd say something to you, and you'd get caught up in the words, the thoughts. It was obvious you couldn't handle the flow of thoughts and nonsense in your head. Is that why you were talking nonsense? Were you just trying to distract me from thinking? Michael shrugged. Sometimes I just like to piss you off, he said, and went into the bedroom, where he went to sleep in a small and hardly comfortable chair, leaving Jennifer alone with her thoughts. She couldn't believe it. She was really stuck on what she had been told. Jennifer spent long periods of time thinking about problems and solutions, and was aware of the problem, but she could never think that Michael noticed it. However, they had lived in the same room for several years. It would be strange not to notice it. We'll have to do a lot of tests, of course, MRIs, blood tests, and so on. Plus, it's important to get him at least out of the state he's in right now. Nervously, Mary turned around to the door of room number 8, where Gary was lying. Since he doesn't have any identification, my hands are tied. If the story Michael told me is true, You should start recovering your papers immediately so we can begin treatment. Mary was a petite blonde with square glasses, a round face, and dimpled cheeks. She smiled at everyone and was polite, also very excited about Michael's arrival. She seemed to really care for him. Only Jennifer couldn't tell in what way she cared for him. "Thank you, Mary. But if he hasn't had memories for 20 years, can they come back?" Mary put her head down into the clipboard. 20 years is a long time, very long. Usually patients recover quickly with care, but your father has signs of frostbite, signs of beatings. He also drank and probably smoked, and he ate leftovers, which obviously didn't improve the situation. Also, for memories to come back, you need familiar surroundings, familiar people, and he was living in an abandoned school, and hardly anyone was trying to help him. I can't say for sure, but the chances are slim to none. We'll do what we can, but I can't promise anything, especially not until he has an ID. Jennifer covered her face with her hand and shook her head. She didn't know what to do or how to be. The situation was getting worse and worse by the second. "Thank you, Mary." Michael smiled and walked away with Mary. When he returned, Jennifer looked sadly at the room where her father was lying. The orderlies had shaved him and cleaned him up. Jennifer had brought new clothes. Now the woman was sure that this old man, her father, was short with blue eyes, a scar, and a tattoo. She had found him, except he didn't remember anything, and it was awful. "Jennifer, I've been thinking about the files. We can't recover them yet," Jennifer said with a heavy heart. Her words were soaked with grief and heaviness. Dad had a business, an apartment, money, and he'd disappeared too suddenly, and he was in a foreign city. Mom had said he was away on a business trip when he disappeared. He flew away, but he couldn't come back, and I think there's a reason for that. He's clearly been helped to forget his life. If we recover the documents and his status, those involved will probably be very unhappy. Michael nodded tiredly and leaned against the cold wall, adjusting the white robe draped over his shoulders. "It's been 20 years. Do you really think anyone still cares? I've been a police officer for 7 years, and I've seen so much brutality. People are sometimes willing to remember things that happened decades ago, and if it involves money, they never forget." "Yeah, I get it. Then you and I need to find out who's responsible for what happened as soon as possible. Otherwise, we won't be able to cure your father. Thank you for helping me and not going against my better judgment." "You're welcome." Michael chuckled. "I've never been against you." Immediately, memories of 12 years ago came to his mind. "What made you think you could yell at her? What makes you think she's to blame for your troubles?" shouted Michael in the face of Jenna, who stood nonchalantly with a glass of wine in the kitchen and slowly chewed expensive cheese. "She's already lived here longer than I thought she would, so she can't live on my money. It's hard work. She doesn't realize that." "Really? And what kind of labor do you do?" Michael asked snidely, squinting his eyes. "Do you type a sentence a day? Or maybe you sleep with another man? Why are you looking at me like that? I know about your lovers and that you're cheating on my father. So go and tell him," whispered Jenna. "You can't. Maybe because your daddy is an alcoholic and he's about to be fired from his job. Oh, and you won't even have a place to live. So don't cross me, puppy, you hear me?" Jenna smiled and waved her hand, and a large purple mug with some writing on it tumbled to the floor. "No," shouted Michael. "Oh, Michael, how could you break Jennifer's favorite mug?" the woman asked in a deliberately loud voice. Jennifer flew into the kitchen and saw the purple shards with the guy standing next to it. Michael sighed and gave Jenna a long look. These were his last days in this apartment, because soon this woman would kick him and his father out. He realized that, But even more, he realized that he couldn't change his mind, otherwise he would be on the street. Michael was sitting at home when Jennifer called and asked him to come over. He was on sick leave, and when he heard about Jennifer's problems, he realized that he would have to take a mini vacation. Mary was happy to help open the sick leave. To summarize Michael, he is a very kind person. Yes, in high school and even in college, he never shone with excessive discipline and obedience. And what a sin to say, in the army too, more than once he was caught in the boorishness of his superiors. However, with time, it passed, and he began to take everything easier. He never refused to help anyone, but at the same time he was not particularly appreciated in the teaching staff. He often ridiculed other teachers, taking the side of the students, realizing perfectly well that he had once been the same. Of course, no one could fire him. He did not violate any rules, but good relations could not be built. The once popular boy has turned into a man who rarely leaves the house. Most of his friends left for other cities, and those who remained have families. Michael rarely went on vacation, devoting most of his time to work. Jennifer became a ray of light in his boring and ordinary life. He even enjoyed going to abandoned houses and trying to find Jennifer's father. Michael got in his car and drove to the address. He didn't know what Jennifer had in mind there, but he didn't care. Talking to her gave him pleasure. He was no longer thinking about how to make it through the weekend. His head was filled with other thoughts. The door to the apartment was open. "Michael, you?" "Come in," shouted a female voice from the far room. The man made his way there and saw a large desk piled with folders, next to which stood a laptop covered in pictures. "What kind of archive summary is this?" Michael grinned and threw his backpack on the couch. "I asked a friend from the police to send me all the documents from my father's missing persons case." "How did he get them so fast?" "Wait, you drove to another city overnight to get them. Jennifer, have you lost your mind? What about the daughter?" "She was with Nancy." Jennifer waved it off and walked over to the stack of files. "Let's see everything. You're crazy, don't you think?" Michael asked, approaching the table. "I need to find the culprit, or my father won't be able to go back to normal." "Yeah. Let's just hurry up, shall we? You can take care of the laptop. There's a file with all of Dad's biography, his phone calls, possessions, and everything. An acquaintance did it." "An acquaintance? I'm getting scared. We worked with him before he moved away." "He's got access to the database, so he's been a big help." "Come on, the sooner we start, the sooner we're done. By the way, Molly's gonna be here soon. I gotta figure out what to tell her." A few hours later, the front door slammed and Molly came running into the room. She was happy and cheerful, obviously wanting to tell her mother something. But when she saw the strange man, she was embarrassed. "Hello," she said quietly. Michael smiled and waved. Jennifer took her daughter to the kitchen. She was not there for a long time, so the man decided not to waste time. He continued to leaf through the files. His gaze stopped on the largest file marked by the author of the list. The man opened it and began to read slowly and thoughtfully. With each line, he was surprised more and more. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. Jennifer came back in and quietly closed the door. She was really tired. She had already gone to bed. Good thing tomorrow was a day off. No homework to do. Where was she up late? At a friend's. Did you find something? What do you know about your father's business? Jennifer shrugged. I was 10. I wasn't really interested in it then. And when I was, there was no one to ask. Did you know why you and your mother didn't get the business? Yeah, they weren't married, so my mom's last name is Clark, and we didn't get my grandmother's 4-bedroom apartment. Not for that reason, there's another. Listen carefully. When opening your father's firm, there was a condition that the shares cannot be inherited in the family line. That is, when one of the partners dies or his withdrawal from the company, all shares go to the remaining partners of the firm. Is this legal? Yes, but it's rare. I suspect your father didn't think much of family when he started the firm. He and Mom got together later. But that's not all. Do you know how many partners there were? Jennifer shook her head and climbed onto the couch with her feet up. 4. Your father, Wilson, Parker, and Smith. Do you know how many are left now? 1 Parker, you think? Wait. 3 years before your dad went missing, Wilson died, heart attack at 41. That early? That's weird and more than that. The thing is, in the will he left, your father inherited the stock. But it's possible, under the bylaws, he had no right to transfer the stock to outsiders, but he transferred it to a partner. And your father got a controlling interest and the ability to run the firm pretty much on his own. But why would Wilson do that? The boat my father made for Molly had a sign on it that's on my boat. Wilson James. I don't remember much about my father, but I do know that my father fell in love with the sea when he met a friend of his, and everything in the house connected to the sea was connected to that friend. I couldn't remember his name, but I think it was Wilson. So he left a will to his father. Perhaps he knew or felt something. But that's not all. 5 years after your father went missing, Smith died of an accident. 5 years, that's the time after which a person is declared dead. Jennifer said thoughtfully, and so passes by law the firm, the remaining partners. And Parker, to get the full package, gets rid of the second partner and remains the sole owner of the firm. The woman whispered, "So you think my father was eliminated to get the inheritance?" "Yes, I suspect that Parker and Smith conspired to get the 50% of the firm that your father had. How did this go unnoticed? Didn't it become suspicious to anyone?" Jennifer asked incomprehensively to herself, rather than to Michael. Money decides everything. You know who lives and who doesn't. The only thing that confuses me is the fact that your father is alive. Wilson and Smith are dead, and your father isn't. And that's easy. I think those who wanted to get rid of my father just hit him and threw him in some quarry. I don't know, but he survived, and luckily he lost his memory. It's scary to realize that. Michael confessed and prostrated himself. "Do you have any coffee?" Jennifer nodded and got up from the couch, her eyes a little hazy. She wasn't looking around. Her eyes were focused on one point. "Are you okay?" Michael asked gently. "So is there coffee?" A few minutes later, she was already standing with a coffee pot and brewing coffee. "Aren't you busy tomorrow?" "Why don't you sit with Molly? I'm going to go into town and visit Parker. I want to ask him something." Michael, who had been sitting at the table before, jumped up and in 2 steps was next to Jennifer. "Are you out of your mind? We assumed a minute ago that he was responsible for 2 people being dead and 120 years without memory, and you decide to go straight to him and claim you know he's a criminal." "Don't yell," Jennifer said tiredly, and lowered her gaze to Michael's hands that held her by the shoulders. She could feel his warmth and his strong grip. "Let me go, or the coffee will be on the floor in a few seconds." Slowly lowering her gaze to her hands, Michael shuffled all the way back. He did it unknowingly. "Are you worried?" Jennifer asked, not demanding an answer. "I've worked with personalities like that, so you don't have to worry about my safety." "I'll go with you," the man said firmly. His confident gaze looked directly at Jennifer. "No arguments. Yeah, I get it. Why are you bothering with me and my problems?" Jennifer asked as they sat down at the table and began to drink coffee. Michael was taken aback and looked at the woman uncomprehendingly. "Well, when I met you, the negative emotions that I experienced as a child flared up in my soul. It's childish, I know. Well, haven't you ever had that?" A quiet chuckle escaped Michael's lips, and he shook his head. "No. Maybe it's because I've never felt negative about you." Jennifer gasped. "What do you mean? You were always building a sneak attack." "Yeah, you said you talked nonsense when you didn't want me to dwell on my thoughts, but that wasn't always the case. I mean, you broke the mug my friends gave me, you broke my headphones, you made fun of me at school, and even blew off boys I dated. You were ruining my life." Jennifer spoke slowly, trying to control the emotions that had suddenly flared up. "Remember the new headphones for my birthday?" "Yes, that was the only gift from Aunt Jenna in all the years." "Why are you looking at me like that?" "No. Wasn't that a gift from her?" Michael grinned. He squinted at the woman, trying to figure out how someone so smart and savvy could be so stupid at times. "The guys and I worked part-time during the summer, and I used the money to buy them. I didn't have enough to buy them, though. I had to borrow some from my father. It was his stash in case of a hangover. He gave me a hell of a beating." Jennifer looked at the man confused. She gently took his hand and tilted her head. "Why?" "You needed them so you wouldn't listen to me. I saw how worried you were about them. I thought you hated me, and you did. I liked you, Jennifer, and I was a silly boy who expressed sympathy through. You understand. Trite, huh?" Jennifer stared incomprehensively in front of her. In an instant her world had been turned upside down. She could sense that something was wrong, but could never quite figure out what. Coping with her emotions, the woman jumped up from the table and announced, "It's decided. We're going into town tomorrow. Jennifer, darling, is that you? Were you about 13 when I last saw you?" asked Kevin Parker, an older man in an expensive suit. He jumped up from his chair as soon as he realized who had come to see him. Michael and Jennifer eyed the man warily, not understanding why he was so welcoming to them. He took them to the local cafeteria and ordered a few not-so-cheap meals himself. "Don't worry, I'm paying. After all, this firm was built by your father's labor and sweat, so it's a shame you couldn't find him. It was you who paid for 8 years to find him." Asked Michael, and Jennifer looked at him shocked. "Yes, I had hoped to find something, but he just disappeared into thin air. All your partners have disappeared strangely, don't you think?" "Uh-oh. I recognize my father's grip." Kevin grinned and smiled sadly. "Yes, it was. I honestly could never believe it was an accident. First James, then John, then Jack. One after another. For 6 years, I only took the garbage out with the guards. I was afraid I'd get the same fate. Weren't you the one who set up that account?" Jennifer asked snidely. "No, I had no reason to. At least Jack's death. After your father went missing, I got the controlling interest, not Jack. Well, I mean, he split it between us, but I got 51%. But what's 100 better? Young man, you've probably never run a big firm on your own. Believe me, it's not that easy. I was going to give some of my shares to Jack to do the main management, and Jack knew about it, along with some lawyers who were drawing up the contract. And then Jack died by accident, and there was definitely an accident here. 2 other workers died on that construction site. There was a safety violation. The site was just shut down. It's all in Jack's file, so I had nothing to do with it." Kevin smiled sadly and sipped water from his glass. "Besides, I had nothing to do with John's disappearance. I had no idea what time he was going home. Only Jack knew his flight time. Jennifer looked at Michael with confusion. If Kevin was to be believed, their version was crumbling before their eyes. And Jack Smith, how had he behaved in the years since John had disappeared? Michael asked gently. He was always calling someone and nervous. I was sure he'd just gotten himself a woman. You could hear in his voice that he was calling a woman, and that was just normal for him. He was always very jumpy and restless. They say that's why he died. You have to stay calm on a construction site. Jennifer and Michael asked Kevin a couple more questions and left. Already in the car, they looked at each other confused. You don't think it's him? Not only did he spend 8 years paying for the search, but he also erected a huge monument to your father. I read in the files he was actually going to give 10% of the shares to Smith, which would have made him the leader. I don't think he just changed his mind and decided to take him out. And he couldn't have been involved in Wilson's death because he was in Israel for over 6 months for treatment, said Michael and looked up from his laptop. How do you know all this? I wrote to the very person you know on your behalf, and he sent me the information on Parker and Smith. Jennifer snatched the laptop out of Michael's hands and took a deep breath. Who gave you permission? You didn't think I'd let you go talk to an alleged criminal, did you? Jennifer turned away from Michael, muttering something quietly under her breath. But Michael could see the edge of a smile on the woman's face. I can't get over the fact that Smith was calling someone all the time. Who was it? 20 years ago, not everyone had a cell phone, and most people called from landlines, which means that somewhere could have saved the number of that lady. Unless, of course, there's still some of Smith's stuff somewhere. Michael concluded. Jennifer grinned and started the car. I read something too. I can't believe you got into the house. Michael hissed and sneezed. Jennifer drove them to the house where Smith once lived. Because he had no one, the house was left vacant and was just another abandoned building. Nobody actually lives here, so I don't see anything wrong with that. You ripped the boards off the windows with a tire iron and climbed in. Michael objected. Oh, it's nothing. We'll write it off to the teenagers. She shrugged her shoulders and walked on, shining a flashlight on her way. Here, shouted Michael. Jennifer walked over and saw the phone with the phone book next to it. How will we know which number we need? The woman shrugged and opened the dusty old book. Michael and Jennifer sneezed at the dust rising. So many years had passed after all. The book flipped through very quickly. Pages skipped until Jennifer saw a number written in red pen. Judging by the spread of the book, it was the page that had been opened the most, and the number had been circled several times in pencil. It wasn't signed, Michael noticed. It doesn't need to be, Jennifer said sadly. I know it by heart. They walked outside in a terrible mood, not knowing how to react to the news. Michael looked directly into Jennifer's eyes. He moved closer to her and kissed her. Jennifer was taken aback. What are you doing? You just broke into the house, found the culprit, well, almost, and probably helped your dad. You're awesome, you know that. You're not what I thought you were either. Jennifer confessed and blushed. Is this the first time in your life you've ever admitted you were wrong? Michael grinned, and Jennifer punched him painfully in the shoulder. You can't make me change my mind. Jennifer smiled imperceptibly. Jenna, is that you? A tall man in black clothing asked, holding out his ID card in front of him. Did you know Smith Jack? Asked the investigator to Jenna when she was at the police station. No. The woman replied hysterically. Your phone number was found in his address book, and there are witnesses who saw you together. So what? He was my lover. Jenna stuck her head up high. Yes, and also the mastermind behind the attack on your brother. He was the only one who knew when he was going home. John was attacked near the train station. An attack? Screamed Jenna. Are you out of your mind? Why would I hurt my own brother? Your mother's 4-bedroom apartment. Clear and concise, the investigator replied. You were up to your neck in debt that year. You had a loan. Yes, and I suspect not only to banks were owed, and immediately after receiving the inheritance in 6 months, you put the apartment for sale, and it was very quickly bought, which suggests that the buyer was found early. You paid off the debt, got rid of your brother, whose not small bank account went to you and his daughter, but since she was small, her mother put her money aside. And after Susan died, you got the leftovers. That's where you got the money for the Beaumont parties, Jenna, isn't it? The investigator asked snidely. Your niece has provided all the evidence that will help me put you away for a long time, as well as solve a 20-year-old case. So you can look for a lawyer, Jenna. You will definitely need one. The investigator was an old friend of Jennifer's. She had heard the entire conversation, thanks to the recorded phone. They listened to the tapes along with Michael, the man holding Jennifer's hand. You win. He smiled. We did, corrected Jennifer and squeezed Michael's hand harder. 3 years later, in front of the 3-story house, a large truck with a transportation sign stopped. 2 uniformed men got out of the truck and walked toward the house. They had keys. An older Mazda parked next to the truck, from which a blonde-haired man with a large bag on his shoulder got out. He looked around the area and opened the back door. A tall girl, about 11 years old, stepped out. She was smiling cheerfully and looking around, hoping to spot something interesting. She was holding a large paper boat. A short, bald old man with a beard got out of the passenger seat. He shouted something to the porters. Where's Jennifer? John asked Michael in a husky voice. Was she supposed to get here before us? Michael shrugged and pulled out his cell phone to dial Jennifer's number. She's probably hanging out with the criminals again. Such nice weather, she's working again. The old man complained. Nature was in full bloom. May was in full bloom. The smell of lilacs everywhere. The sun was shining so brightly that it seemed as if summer had already arrived. The trees were covered with little leaves, birds were singing on all sides, and the pond behind the house glistened in the sun. It really was grace, not weather, but Jennifer was at work again. She had been spending too much time there lately. That was Michael's opinion. Uncle Michael, look. Molly shouted and pointed to the road, where a police car with flashing lights was coming almost at full speed. About 100 meters from the 3-story house, she turned off her lights and began to slow down. The police Ford stopped in front of Michael. Jennifer jumped out of the back seat and waved to the driver and his partner. Thanks, guys, I'll owe you one. Good luck. Jennifer turned back to her family and was met with shocked looks. Why, you actually took my car, so I had to improvise. Where have you been? Michael asked. Were you going to miss the housewarming party? Jennifer rolled her eyes and walked toward the house. She was in a great mood, and even the nagging of her favorite person wouldn't ruin this beautiful day. For the first time in years, she felt at home. In an unfinished building, where they had just brought the sealed furniture, but this place was truly her own. Her whole family would gather under one roof, and for the first time in a long time, the woman felt happy. By the way, were you supposed to be at work too? Jennifer remarked snidely, showing the movers where to carry the big couch. It was your class that put on the Metallica concert near the principal's house. You got a call, but you didn't answer. I don't take work numbers on weekends. Michael muttered and wondered what kind of reprimand he'd get on Monday when he got back to his favorite class. The head teacher had told him not to take those slackers, but how could he refuse them? It was almost impossible. Oh, he'd probably lose his bonus. Although, it would seem, what's he got to do with it? End of the year guys are out for their last free year. Why touch them? Snapping her fingers in front of Michael's eyes, Jennifer chuckled and walked into the house. These blackouts often happened when the man was thinking about something. It had been especially so in the last year. If someone had told Jennifer 15 years ago about what Michael would be thinking, she would have twisted her finger at her temple. Molly ran into the house first and immediately rushed to the second floor, where she chose the largest and most beautiful room. True, there was nothing special about it yet, but Grandpa already had a plan to please his granddaughter. John had not recovered all of his memory, but he had definitely gotten some of it back. He couldn't testify at the trial against his sister because the doctors wouldn't give him permission. However, the prosecutor still referred to his memories. However, and without his help, Jenna was sentenced to 11 years in a general security colony, and all the money and the apartment returned to the owner. It is worth recognizing that Mary turned out to be a good doctor. The first successes in the treatment of John appeared after a couple of months, and 6 months later he already remembered his daughter. A year later, he remembered almost all the events of the last 30 years of his life. However, it was very difficult to fully recover his memory. Jennifer has never been able to get from her father's memories of how he met her mother. Yes, and much that was before the birth of his daughter, he did not remember. However, that didn't make him any less loved. Molly almost immediately got used to her grandfather, spent a lot of time with him, and often asked for help. John taught his granddaughter how to make ships out of paper and was very happy to have a family again. He recalled with a sad smile the years he spent on the streets. Michael also became friends with his father-in-law, although it must be admitted that for a long time he could not get used to him. His grouchiness and slight arrogance kept John from trusting his son-in-law. Jennifer was walking up the stairs to the top of the stairs. She took Michael under her arm and pulled him to the third floor. There was the largest room with a huge window and a small terrace. Jennifer and Michael had chosen this place for themselves together. The woman wanted to arrange on the terrace a corner of rest with flowers, and Michael dreamed of sitting there and reading books. However, their desires did not contradict each other. As soon as the hatch leading to the stairs slammed shut, Jennifer spun in place and started laughing loudly. Michael looked at her with a half smile. "Have you decided to go crazy?" "I guess you just know. I feel like this is the first white streak in my life, like there were none before, a lifetime-long black streak." Michael slowly walked over to Jennifer and hugged her. "May the white streak be as long as the black streak." Jennifer reached into her bag with her hand and pulled out a time-yellowed, framed ship from there. It was here, in this room, that the symbol of their happy life would hang.
Subscribe and click the bell.
God, where is she? Why isn't she answering? Samuel couldn't find a place to go, waiting for his wife to call. What's going on over there? They know I'm worried. Suddenly the phone came to life, and the man grabbed the receiver. Samuel! He heard his wife's voice. "Don't worry, please. Susan?" The angry husband ranted. "Where the hell have you been? Why aren't you answering your phone? I don't know where to go or what to do." "Samuel, congratulations. We have a baby girl." "What? I don't understand." The husband is dumbfounded. "What girl?" "A daughter." Susan laughed happily. "We had a daughter." "Wait, but it's a month away, isn't it?" "It just happened. I guess I got banged up on the road and went into premature labor. That's why I couldn't call you." "Don't worry, she's fine. She was born healthy and beautiful." "What do you mean? Don't worry?" My husband was furious. I persuaded you not to go to your mother. No, you carried 300 kilometers away, and without me. I knew that this whole thing would not end well. But I had to visit my mom. My wife justified herself. It's not such a long distance. It all worked out. The doctors and nurses here are marvelous. They treat me like a piece of paper. What are you talking about? There's a private clinic waiting for you here. We picked it out together. I paid for it a long time ago. It's no big deal. You'll get your money back. Believe me, it's no worse than the one in town. So tell me where this hospital is right now. I'm on my way right now. I won't leave you for a minute. You must see good doctors. Susan dictated the address to Samuel. Holy Mother! He cursed when he saw that the hospital was located in some godforsaken district center. Where the hell did you go? Okay, wait. I'm on my way. Susan stood at the window, watching the snow fall outside. Her newborn daughter was sleeping peacefully beside her. Susan, how are you feeling? A nurse came into the room. I'm fine. The woman smiled gratefully. My daughter is sleeping. My husband should come to pick us up soon. He was upset that I gave birth early. Lucky you and your husband. The nurse sighed. He's caring. Yes, we have been waiting 10 years for this child. We have been everywhere, checked everything. The tests were great, but we couldn't get pregnant. Do you know how painful it was to look at the moms who refused to give up their babies? We are young and healthy, cannot give birth to a baby, and these woeful moms, God gave such happiness, and they refuse it. And now the woman came to the crib and looked affectionately at the girl. We are happy to, the three of us. It's a shame about the refuseniks, the nurse said. I have so much milk. Susan laughed suddenly. There's enough for two. To tell you the truth, I've always dreamed of having twins so we could have 2 kids at once. The joy of all the years of waiting. Susan? The woman asked, hesitating. There's a little boy in the room, a sweet boy. His mother died in childbirth, and we haven't even seen his father. If you have a lot of milk, maybe you would agree to feed him. I have to pump anyway. Oh, and of course, bring him quickly. The young mother agreed. But he must have grandparents, right? They should, but Lisa, the boy's mother's name, said no one wanted her and her son. That's terrible. Poor thing. Tears came to Susan's eyes. Don't worry, you'll lose your milk. The nurse was scared. I feel fine. Bring the boy in. 5 minutes later, the woman returned with the baby in her arms, sucking greedily on the breast, looking at Susan with blue eyes. Little one. The woman said quietly and stroked the baby's head, kissed the pink cheek. Only 2 days of his life, and already he has experienced grief and betrayal, and now he is going to the orphanage. While we will stay with us, and then to the baby house, maybe someone will be lucky enough to adopt him. The boy is healthy, and his mom is not some alcoholic. Her kidneys failed, and here we do not have such equipment as in the city, so they did not save. She sighed sorrowfully. There was a noise in the corridor. What's going on in there? The nurse left Susan and walked out of the room. A man? She heard a woman. Where are you going? You can't go in the room. There are children in there. Let me through. The door opened and Samuel appeared on the threshold. My wife is here. Susan put her finger to her lips, still cradling the boy, who, because of the sudden sounds, let out his chest and was about to cry, wrinkling his nose funny. She pointed to the crib where their daughter was sleeping peacefully and continued feeding the baby. Susan? A nurse came into the room. Give me the boy. Daddy, you won't be here long, no visitors allowed. They're discounting the fact that you've traveled a long way. I got it. Thank you. The nurse took the baby away. Susan. Samuel handed his wife a bouquet of flowers, kissed her, and then asked her sternly, "What was that just now?" "Samuel," Susan whispered hotly. "Let's take this boy, shall we?" "Are you crazy?" The man marveled. "Are you out of your mind? How could we take someone else's baby?" "My love, his mother died, and his relatives have written a refusal. Nobody wants him, you understand. We'll have a girl and a boy. That's great. Do you realize you're taking someone else's baby into the house?" Samuel was really pissed off. "What if it's sick or we can't handle it? Are you going to take it back? It's not like picking up a kitten on the street. It's a person." "I get it." Susan looked at her husband pleadingly. "We can handle it. His mom was a decent woman, not a drunk, not a drug addict." "Okay." Samuel paced the room from corner to corner. "I don't want to hear anything about him right now, you understand? I'm tired from the road. You're emotionally asking me to take in an orphan. Let's do it like this. The doctor said you're gonna have to stay here for a couple more days. We'll think it over with a cool head, and then we'll decide." "Okay." "Okay," Susan replied, looking at her husband with a rapturous gaze. "I love you, and I love you." The man leaned over and kissed his wife, then walked over to the crib where their daughter was sleeping peacefully. "Thank you for the baby." He leaned over the girl, scrutinizing her face. "How long we've waited for this day." "Yes, I'm very happy. We are both happy, and now I have to go." Samuel said regretfully, "Your nurse is very strict. I'm afraid she'll kick me out. I'd better go myself." He smiled, went to his wife again, hugged her and kissed her. "Don't miss me. I'll come back tomorrow." Her husband left, and Susan did not sleep. She thought whether it was right to adopt a boy. Doubts did not give her peace. Finally, she got up and left the room. "Helen?" She turned to the nurse on duty. "Don't forget to bring the rejected boy to me for feeding. There's nothing for you to do." The girl wrinkled her nose. "Feed yours. You'll be leaving soon anyway, and he needs to get used to the bottle. But you still bring it." The woman asked insistently. The nurse shrugged and went back to her work. Susan stood for a moment longer, then returned to the room. She had fed the babies twice during the night, and each time her heart sank when the boy was taken from her arms. "We're discharging you tomorrow," the attending physician said. "The tests are good. There's no point in keeping you here any longer." Good. Samuel was happy when his wife told him. "Let's go home at last, Samuel." Susan looked at her husband questioningly. "You promised to think about the boy. Do you still insist?" "I don't insist. It has to be our mutual decision. I'll give it up if you say no, but before you say anything, think carefully. Maybe fate has put it in our hands. We're hardly going to get a second one, age and all, and here's a chance. Don't you have a heart? He'll be alone. He'll be placed in an orphanage. Then maybe he'll be adopted. We don't know where he'll end up, but he'll be fine with us. We love him like family. Okay." Ruffling the hair on the back of his neck, Samuel said, "Suppose we take him, but how will you explain his appearance to our relatives?" "I've got it all figured out." Encouraged by Samuel's words, Susan hurried on. "We'll say I'm having twins, but how do you envision it?" The man clutched his head. "We told everyone we were expecting a girl." "So what?" "We can say that we just hid the presence of a second fetus. We wanted to make a surprise. But think about it. Who will find out the details?" "What about the parents?" Samuel doubted. "I think we should tell the parents the truth." "Well, Samuel, my beloved husband, what decision will we make?" As you say, so it will be. I agree with your opinion. Ouch! He waved his hand. Be what it will be. The boy needs a home, and we could use a second child. Samuel! Susan shrieked with joy so as not to wake her daughter and threw herself on her husband's neck. I knew it. I knew you'd say yes. Do you know what paperwork the adoptive parents need to gather? I don't know, but I think our doctor can help with that. They left the room and went in search of a doctor. Margaret? The young men knocked at 6, entered the residence room. We need to talk to you. Go ahead. Samuel could see the question in her gaze and the shy hope in her eyes. We're here about the abandoned boy. What do you want to know? We're ready to adopt him. Guys, Margaret splashed her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. I'm so happy for you and for him. You're great. I'm sure this child will bring you happiness. We came to find out what documents we need to prepare, and also to ask when we can take him home. I'll tell you everything. The doctor hurried away. Here you go. She took out a long list of documents from some folder. We can't get it all together in a year. Samuel exclaimed, I understand. The woman was embarrassed. But that's the way it is. We can't just give the baby away. We have to make sure you're healthy, that he won't need anything. We were just about to go home. Susan was confused. What about the baby? You're not giving him to us now. I'm sorry. The doctor waved her hand sadly. We have to do all the paperwork first. What do we do? Susan looked at her husband in bewilderment. You'll have to stay with your mom for a while, Samuel said. We will calmly draw up the documents, here on the spot. Probably you can do it faster, and your return will look more natural. Don't worry, my love, he whispered in her ear. We'll make it work. What about your job? I think I can stay for a week. At least we'll have time to go through the doctors, and we'll figure out the rest. They said goodbye to the doctor and talked about where to start. Then Susan called her mother and told her she was coming. Daughter. Vanessa ran out onto the porch to greet her dear guests. Oh, I'm so glad. I never thought I'd see my granddaughter again. I thought you'd leave right away. Mom. Kissing her, the young woman said, We have something to talk to you about. Come in. Why are you stuck outside? Father is all exhausted, waiting for you. He can't wait to wash his feet with his son-in-law. When the joyful fuss had died down, the parents and guests gathered in the living room. Mom, Dad, Susan announced, we've decided to adopt. It's an informed decision. The daughter gestured to stop her father, who was about to be outraged. We've thought it over, but we don't want anyone but you and us to know that Hunter is a stranger to us by blood. Will you promise not to tell anyone? But my daughter, Vanessa tried to reason with the young parents. Are you sure you're doing the right thing? And how long will you hide from the baby that he is not your own? He must never know about it. Susan said firmly. The next day, the young people took the tests and went to the child welfare office. The head of the department read Samuel on a sign nailed to the door. Helen. Hello. They hesitantly walked into the office, where an elderly woman sat behind a desk. She gave them a stern look at the threshold. Have you seen the appointment times for personal matters? We did. Samuel smiled disarmingly. But maybe you could make an exception for us. We want to adopt a boy. So. The woman asked in a displeased tone, looking at them over her glasses. Please leave my office and come back as scheduled. What kind of person are you? The man stormed out. We're talking about a child. We can't wait. Every day he spends in the hospital is like a day in jail for an adult. Don't make your own rules. I'm not going to change my work schedule because of you. This conversation is over. She's up. Please, Helen." Susan looked at her pleadingly. "Help, and we will not be in your debt." The woman suddenly softened. "All right, what child?" Rejoicing at the sudden change in the department head's mood, Susan described the situation. "Well, my darlings," the woman sat back in her seat. "First, gather all the certificates." She put a list in front of them. "No one will give you the baby without them. Isn't there any way to speed up the process?" "No way." The employee waved her hands. "Maybe you are some kind of criminals, and you will do a hell of a lot with the child. Or had a criminal record. We must also look at the conditions in which you live, whether your income allows you to support the baby. Think about it." Samuel was getting more and more annoyed. Would we take a child if we didn't know what we could do? "I don't know, it's not written on you." Helen was adamant. "If you get the certificates, come back and we'll set a court date." "What trial?" "Well, it's all through the court. The child didn't fall out of the sky into your hands. What if the relatives want to bring him up themselves? They've already written a waiver. That's the way it's supposed to be, and stop arguing, or I'll think you're mentally unstable." "Samuel," Susan whispered pleadingly in her husband's ear, "don't argue with her, or they won't give Hunter back." "Well," roughly asked the woman, settling back into the chair, "why are you standing up? Go get the certificates. If you haven't changed your mind, I'm not going to collect them for you." Right away, they claimed to be in a hurry, but they froze like a statue. The young people left the office, shocked by the cold reception. "Old bitch," Samuel scolded. "There's nothing human left. If you want to do a good deed, you'll come across such bookish people, and you'll send the whole system to hell." "Darling, why are you so angry?" His wife tried to calm him down. "You can understand them too. They stand guard of the law. We are strangers. No one knows us here. No one to vouch for us. How many like us have passed through her hands? You'd think they'd look at the certificates and know us better." "Calm down, please. We'll get this paperwork together, and we'll all go home together. We have a lot of paperwork to put up with." 3 whole months went by without a hitch. Samuel and Susan were worried because the court hearing was tomorrow. The adoption case was being heard. The clerk announced. The judge read the application, familiarized herself with the certificates that the young family provided. "Why do you need this child?" she asked. "You have a daughter. Why do you need a stranger?" "Listen," Samuel spoke. "We couldn't have children for a long time, and we are unlikely to have a second one. We are not 18 years old. This boy is a gift from heaven. Can't you understand?" "Don't get excited." The judge stopped him. "Answer in substance. There is a certain order, and I ask you to follow it. We want to help the child." Susan answered firmly. "To find a family. We have the means. You've seen our documents. We have the will, and we have everything." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "I fell in love with him immediately because I had to feed him with my milk. I'm his milk mom, if you know what I mean." "I do." The judge looked at the young couple intently. "And if things don't work out, you can't take him back to the orphanage. It would be a tragedy for the baby." "No, it wouldn't. No one's going to give him up," Susan assured me fervently. "We already love him like his own and can't wait to take him home." The judge looked at Samuel, then looked at Susan and said, "I believe you for some reason. I hope I haven't misjudged you." The court recessed for deliberation. The clerk announced. A representative of the guardianship authorities followed the judge into the deliberation room. "All rise, the court is in session." The clerk again announced, "The application for adoption is granted," solemnly pronounced the judge. "Thank you," Susan whispered, fell back in her chair and sobbed. "Why are you crying?" Smiling, Margaret asked her. Everything is fine now. The boy will go with you." "Congratulations." She took Susan's crying hand and shook it reassuringly. "When can we pick up our son?" The new father asked. "We can't wait to introduce him to his new home. If within 10 days none of the relatives will make a claim, then the child can be taken away." The judge looked at him carefully and said respectfully, "And in general, you are, of course, good to take someone else's child for upbringing not everyone will dare. Usually they are abandoned and rarely taken into the family. They are not good." Helen joined the conversation. "They have no idea what awaits them. We don't know what kind of heredity this boy has," she said glumly, as if they would not have to bite their elbows later and run to us and ask us to reverse the case. We've known such people, and then the children suffer all their lives, then in orphanages. "Why did you do that?" Margaret told her off. "Everything will be fine. You can see that people are responsible. They took this step consciously, and you can take the boy right now, without waiting for the 10 days to expire." The relatives, if they wanted to, have long ago announced themselves and claimed the rights to the child. So go home quietly, settle in, happiness for you and the children. She said a warm farewell to the parents of the babies. The next day, Susan and Samuel came to the maternity hospital and picked up the boy. "Meet." Smiling happily, the woman announced as they entered her parents' home, "This is Hunter, your grandson." Her husband placed the bundle on the table, undressed the boy. He looked at the adults around him with both curiosity and fear. Then, unexpectedly, he roared in a bass voice, tapping his little hands and feet. The adults laughed. "Susan?" Vanessa asked her daughter when the passions had subsided and the children, washed and fed, slept in the crib. "What are we going to tell the relatives?" After all, everyone was expecting a girl, and then a boy came out of nowhere. "How can you explain this phenomenon?" "It's a bit of a mystery, so I'll have to tell them. I'm afraid some people won't approve of your decision to adopt a boy." "Mom, we've already thought of everything. No one from the relatives, except you, my parents, and Samuel, must not know that Hunter is not our own. We have to try to forget that we adopted him like it never happened. After all, he's our son now. His real parents' names are only on the adoption certificate. How do you forget that? You can't lie your whole life. As the years go by, you'll realize they're not related. They don't look alike." "We won't tell, but are you sure Samuel's parents won't tell anyone the secret of the boy's birth?" "I'm afraid that one day there will be trouble." "When will that be?" Susan dismissed it. "For now, we're sticking to the legend that I gave birth to twins." "Why couldn't it have been?" "I wonder, twins." The mother snorted incredulously. "How did we get twins? And why didn't you say anything the whole pregnancy?" "I didn't say anything so that no one would envy our happiness or jinx it. If someone asks in whose family was twins, say on the husband, no one will not check. How can you hide something like that?" "Oh, daughter, this is not a good idea. And if someone finds out, can you imagine what a blow to the boy would be? If someone told him one day that he wasn't your kin, you can't hide anything from the neighbors. You won't even be able to visit without a care. That's why Susan reassured her. The only people who know about the adoption are you and us. The fewer people who know what we're doing, the better chance we have of keeping it a secret. No one in the village has ever seen me pregnant, so there will be no questions about where another baby came from, and we can visit you in peace. And if someone from the maternity hospital blabbed about it, you can't put a handkerchief on every mouth." "Mommy," Susan hugged her mother. "Even if some information leaks out, they'll forget it over time. And as for guests, You can come and stay as long as you like. You know you're always welcome." As the years went by, the children grew up and their differences became more and more apparent. "Listen, Susan," one day her cousin asked her, watching her nephews play on the playground, "why is Hunter's hair so black and his eyes brown?" "I'm surprised. You and Samuel are both blonde, and Nancy is blonde, so who does he look like?" Samuel's parents have dark hair. Susan felt a chill inside. She didn't pay attention to little things like that. "You saw them." "Oh, who knows about genes? How am I supposed to know whose breed Hunter is? Personally, I don't care. Look how smart that boy is. But he and his sister look nothing alike. So what? Nancy's our breed and Hunter's his father's. It's still strange." The woman eyed the boy suspiciously. "Are you sure you didn't have your baby switched at the hospital? I saw a program on TV the other day where several families suffered because of negligent nurses. Imagine, only to find out that the children were accidentally switched. Don't be ridiculous." Susan told her off. "What are you doing with my kids? Have your own and put them under a microscope. It's like, it's not like. Even if it is, nature is so inexplicable. Doesn't it happen that babies don't look much like their parents? If I were you, I'd get a DNA test, see if they're really switched. Brother and sister can't be so different, but if you gave birth to them from Samuel, they are." She laughed. "Are you out of your mind? How could that thought even enter your head? What should I think?" The relative excused herself. "I could be offended by such words. Come on." The woman poked Susan in the side conciliatingly. "I was joking." Next time, doubts visited the kindergarten teacher. "Susan?" she asked with a laugh. "I look at your babies and I can't understand how the same parents have such different children. Nancy is such a creative girl, singing, dancing, and how she tells poems. Hunter is completely different, silent, no creative skills, but he's already solving math problems." Susan remarked sharply, "I don't get it. What are you implying?" No, I'm not implying anything." The young teacher was frightened. "I just can't understand why they don't even look alike. Because they're twins and twins can be different. In fact, leave my kids alone. Curiosity won't get you anywhere. Ask less questions. Do more with your kids." Susan said coldly, "I'm sorry." The teacher was embarrassed. "I didn't mean anything bad, but it's strange that they don't look alike at all, as if they came from different parents." Such conversations made Susan panic, and she tried to control herself and not get into an argument, proving that the man was wrong to question her children's parentage. Hunter and Nancy had been very friendly since childhood. If one of them was hurt, the other always came to the rescue. They were feared at school because the two of them could put any bully in his place, and yet sometimes there were situations that made their parents worry. "Mom?" Hunter asked one day, "What's your blood type?" "B positive." "And Dad?" "B positive." "Why do you ask?" "What's mine?" "You?" Susan hesitated and looked helplessly at her husband. "Yes." Waiting, looking at the parents, the son asked. "Today we talked about blood types in biology, and I don't know which one I have. You see." The woman was confused and then gathered herself and spoke cheerfully. "In the maternity hospital, and children do not determine the blood type if the R factor is positive. That's why we don't know exactly what yours is." "And what could be?" insisted son. "Any type. If you have studied this topic in biology, you should know that in our case, children can have any blood type." "How can I find out mine?" "You can get your blood analyzed and ask to have your blood type determined." Satisfied with his mother's answers, Hunter went about his business, while Susan poured herself a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. The older she gets, the more she asks questions that stump me. Thank goodness you found something to answer. My husband remarked, I'm afraid to guess what he'll ask next time. Time was running fast. The high school graduation came unexpectedly. Had we waited and our children would receive their diplomas today? Susan rejoiced, waiting for the celebration. I can't believe how fast the school years have gone by. I'm glad, Dad said, that they already know where they're going to go. They're wonderful children. Nancy will have a hard time. Mother smiled. The exact sciences were still unknown to her. Maybe she shouldn't have gone to an institute. A technical school was enough for a girl. Nothing. A good education has never hurt anyone. I'm glad that children help each other. Father remarked, Hunter won't leave her. You'll see she'll study for 2. The children went to university. Studying was not easy for the daughter at first, but Hunter studied with her sister in the evenings, and soon she began to make progress. Sister, do you know where we have all the documents? Hunter asked her once. I need my passport urgently, and I have no idea where to find it. Look in the cupboard. I think I've seen it there recently. Nancy responded, Why do you need one? I want to enroll in a driving course. They don't accept applications without a passport. Answered his brother, digging through the papers. So, Hunter listed aloud the documents he'd found. Marriage certificate, Mom's birth certificate, Dad's birth certificate. Nancy, your certificate is also here in mine, and here's the passport. He shook it triumphantly in the air. And what's this? Hunter frowned as he read it. An adoption certificate, and there was a tag from the maternity hospital with the date of his birth and his mother's name on it. Why are you so quiet? Nancy asked cheerfully, entering the room. What's wrong with your face? The girl asked, coming up close to her brother. Have you found the secret materials? She snatched the document out of his hands. What are you reading? Letters from the past. Well, adoption certificate. I wonder whose? Hunter. The girl turned pale after reading the contents of the document. Her brother stood with his teeth clenched tightly. His cheekbones were jaundiced. He forcefully clenched his fingers into a fist so that the knuckles turned white. This is yours. What do you mean? You're not my own. Adopted? She looked at her brother confused. It turns out that way. Muffled, the young man answered. And all this time you have lived with us as my own brother. Who are you then? Where are you from? And who are your parents? I don't know. Hunter looked at his sister confusedly. It was the first time he had seen this paper himself. That's the news. It's quite a sensation. Where did you come from? And why didn't our parents ever tell us about it? Why did they hide it? I know as much as you do. Hunter was shocked by the sudden revelation of the truth about his birth. I started to notice something was wrong with us a long time ago. Usually real brother and sister feel for each other, but I've never felt anything like that for you. I was always surprised, but now it's all falling into place. That's why you're nothing to me. Hunter stood looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. Well, why aren't you saying anything? Nancy was starting to get angry. You always kept silent when there was trouble, and now you are silent. And I couldn't understand why your father and mother lick you so much. Hunter this, Hunter that, everything for Hunter. They felt obligated, and Hunter took advantage of that. Nancy. Hunter said warningly, Let's be quiet now, so that we don't say too much and regret it later. I don't like this whole situation either. This is my first time seeing this document just like you. I don't know when or why it all happened. At least, I don't remember. You might want to keep quiet for a while so I can think. I have yet to live with this. I'm in a worse position than you are, and you don't shut me up." The girl had already got into the role of a whistleblower and couldn't stop. Now a lot of things are explained. Like what? Why they bought you a brand new suit for the prom and I had to wear my cousin's dress. You don't think I wanted a new dress? I was going to the International Math Olympiad. That's why they bought me one, not for graduation. Don't you remember? So you're so smart. You get the best, and I'm stupid. It'll do. Why are you talking nonsense? No one thinks you're stupid. Our parents always buy us both something. They don't neglect anyone. Why are you trying to insult them now? Remember, she went after my brother. We got bikes in 8th grade. They got Hugh a new high-speed bike, and they got me a hand-me-down simple one. So we got a Hunter again, and that's fine for Nancy. You say it never happened. I was already a good rider, and you were just learning. Why would you need a fast one? Your parents wanted you to start riding properly, and you have an explanation for everything. Nancy said with a sneer, and if you hadn't been there, it would have been all for me. My parents wouldn't have to split it between the two of us. Do you remember when we didn't go to the camp at the sea? Why didn't we? It was expensive to send 2 people. You'd be a drag everywhere. Tears spurted from Nancy's eyes. Childhood resentments that had been piling up for years came flooding out like a cornucopia. She pounded Hunter's chest painfully with her fist, then pounded on him. He struggled to turn away from the blows. It's all because of you, and you're a nobody, adopted and from who knows where. If it wasn't for you, Mommy and Daddy would only love me. You stole their love from me. Nancy, you don't know what you're saying. The young man, looking at his crying sister, was ready to cry too, but held himself back. He was unbearably hurt by his sister's words and even more hurt by the truth he had learned. "I know," the girl screamed. "I know. I've had to share my parents' attention with you all my life. They treated me like a silly little girl, but you're a math star. You're smart, strong, and I'm just an app. Even at school, you're a role model, and no one ever paid attention to me. You have your own talents." Hunter tried to calm her down. "Why are you trying to insult me now? It's hard enough as it is. Believe me, I don't like this whole situation, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Your parents always put you first, but in reality, you're nothing and your name is nothing. You're a stranger to us. Get out of our house. There's nothing here for you. Dad and Mom are mine, understand? And you go back to yours. Where are they? They abandoned you. They abandoned you, and they took pity on you. A poor orphan, a foundling. I hate you, I hate you." She rushed to her room, fell on her bed, and wept. At these words, which sounded like a slap in the face, Hunter turned pale. "All right then," he said. "If that's the way you want it, I'll leave. I'll find my real parents and forget about you. I don't want anything from you, so live as you wish. Go away." Tears were streaming down his face as his sister ran after him. "No one will be sorry for you. Do you expect me to run and beg you to stay? I won't." He threw some things into his backpack, took his laptop, and carefully folded the adoption certificate and tag. At the door, he looked back, said a silent goodbye, and walked out of the house that had become a stranger to him in an instant. Nancy shuddered when the front door slammed, jumped out of bed. Somewhere inside, remorse awoke, but the girl quickly wiped the tears and tried to calm down. "Gone," she said. "So be it." She was pleased with herself. The childish resentments that had accumulated in her heart had finally come out. "I should have told him a long time ago and that's what he should do. I never want to see him again in my life. And my parents? How could they do that? They didn't consult me, didn't ask me if I even wanted a brother. She closed her eyes, still sobbing, and fell asleep, tired, devastated. She awoke to the sound of her parents' voices in the kitchen. They were discussing something animatedly, chuckling. Nancy got up, went into the bathroom, washed her tear-swollen eyes, then wandered into the kitchen. Her mother was busy at the stove. "Daughter," Susan asked cheerfully, noticing her. "Call your brother. We'll have dinner. I'm hungry." "I can't eat. I think I could swallow a mammoth right now." "What's the matter with you? Your eyes are red. Have you been crying?" She looked at her daughter worriedly. "I'll get her," Samuel answered. He went into his son's room and shouted from there. "He's not there. It's strange." "Nancy?" he asked his daughter, coming back. "Do you know where your brother is? Did you two have a fight?" The mother looked at the girl sternly. "He is not my brother," Nancy replied glumly, sitting down at the table. "What?" the parents exclaimed with glee. "Are you overheated in the sun? What do you hear?" The girl replied swaggeringly, starting to eat. "Don't pretend to be surprised. I know everything. He's nobody to me. Stand up when you talk to your parents." The mother turned pale and forced her daughter to rise from the table. "What are you talking about? What happened between you two? Tell me now, why do you care about him so much? He's not your own son." Hunter found the adoption certificate. We talked to him for a while. She briefly recounted her conversation with Hunter. "He left. I think he did the right thing. It's not his home, and you cheated me. I thought of him as my brother for 20 years, and he's a stranger who's been put into my family by someone else's grace, and you forgot to ask me if I wanted a brother. Are you out of your mind?" Mother was furious. "How could we ask you? You were just born then, both of you. Why didn't you tell us later? Why didn't we talk?" Nancy insisted. "Listen, daughter, Susan could hardly control herself. Maybe it's our fault for not talking to you sooner, and we certainly didn't expect it to come out so suddenly. But it's our decision, and it has nothing to do with you, much less Hunter. It's not his fault he was orphaned from birth. I didn't expect you, daughter, to throw a man out of his home. Tell me now, where could Hunter have gone? Father was out of his mind. If anything happens to him, I will never forgive you." "How should I know?" Nancy shrugged her shoulders irritably. "He probably went to look for his real mother, and rightly so. There's nothing for foster children to do in our house. Let him go to hell. I won't cry." Susan, not expecting you herself, swung around and slapped her daughter. "Mom," the girl grabbed her cheek. Tears came to her eyes from the pain. "You hit me?" "Your own daughter hit me because of some prodigal. How can you do this to me? Do you love him more than me? Don't you dare call him that." Susan shouted in anger. "You don't know anything." She fell back in her chair. "You don't know anything." The woman cried. "He has no one. His mother died in childbirth. There was no father, and his relatives refused. I fed him milk with you. I'm his milk mother, and he's not a stranger to us. I don't understand how you can be so callous. He's nobody to me." Nancy was stubborn. "Maybe I'm a stranger to you, too." Rubbing her reddened cheek, she asked, "You wouldn't beat a native, and all because of that Hunter. Well, kiss your favorite, of course. He's the best." "You're wrong." Trying to pull himself together, my father said, "If you think we love him more than you, we've never made any distinction between you. Remember, if we punished both of you, we praised you too. Remember how Hunter defended you if we were angry. He was willing to take punishment for you. Remember how he took the hit when a tree in the forest almost fell on you during a thunderstorm? He had his back to you. You little fool. You jealous little girl. You were at camp, don't you remember? He broke his arm then. He had to wear a cast for a month during the summer. Of course you forgot. Your empty head only remembers the wrongs, but not the good. I remember. Nancy's lips quivered. And you're still defending him now? I mean nothing to you. What are you talking about, silly? Her father put his arms around her, sat her down beside him on the couch, wiped away her tears. And remember, you were still small. Before Christmas we punished you and left you without sweets, and he gave you his present, and you sat under the table, eating candy, and thought we could not see anything. And after all that, you say he's not your own. How could you insult your brother? Yes, your parents are different, but sometimes strangers are much closer than family. If Hunter hadn't found that damned certificate, would it have occurred to you to question your parentage? You too couldn't be spilled with water. Mama, Papa. Nancy suddenly burst into tears. I'm such a fool. I've hurt Hunter. I'm selfish. He'll never forgive me. What have I done? He will. Susan took her daughter's hand. He will. We just have to find him first. Let's think together about where he might have gone. You know, the father asked, which kids is he friends with the most? Classmates? Neighbors? You know his neighborhood better than we do. Think of names, phone numbers, places you've been. Yes. Now. Wiping away her tears, Nancy started calling her friends. Hello, Ethan. Do you have Hunter? I can't get through. My parents are worried. If you have any, tell them to call me right away. She hung up. I haven't seen her. Call someone else. Susan interrupted her. Nancy dialed number after number, but each time she flailed her arms helplessly. No one had seen him. She roared again. What do we do? He'll come back, won't he? Mom, Dad, tell me, will he come back? Will we find him? There's nothing to do at home, Samuel said. I suggest we go to the yards. Dad got up, started to get dressed. Maybe he's sitting on a bench somewhere now, hesitating to go home, resentment getting in the way. He doesn't know that Nancy's head is back on straight. What a mess you've made of things, daughter. Father shook his head reproachfully. I know. Like a straw, the mother grasped at the suggestion. Let's go look for him, ask around, see if any of the neighbors have seen him. He couldn't have disappeared without a trace. They went to all the nearest yards, but Hunter seemed to have vanished into thin air. Okay, Samuel was determined. Now it's late. It's pointless to go through the yards. It's unlikely to spend the night on a bench, probably hiding somewhere. Let's wait till morning. Maybe his son will show up. After all, he's a sensible man. And if he doesn't? Susan looked painfully at her husband. He had been wronged, and God only knows what was going on in his head. Nancy has told him so much. If he doesn't come back, we'll go to the police in the morning. It's useless to look for him ourselves. Let the professionals do it. They went home and went to their rooms. Mother woke up from every rustle. But Hunter did not appear, did not call, did not send a message. The night passed without sleep, waiting. It was our own fault, Susan said in the morning as she made breakfast. For some reason we left the documents in a prominent place. We should have destroyed them immediately. I asked you to. I've forgotten all about them. My father lamented. I never thought that someone would need to go through old papers. Well, now it's too late to sprinkle ashes on your head. Let's have breakfast and go to the police. What about me? Nancy asked, wrapped in a blanket and squinting her sleepy eyes. You stay home and wait for your brother. Keep your cell phone on you, and if he shows up, call him right away. You got it? Okay. Parents, I'm sorry. She said it guiltily. We're not the ones you need to apologize to. Susan and Samuel drove to the police station, her father driving silently, staring at the road. Nothing bad should happen to him, right? Susan asked suddenly. Of course not. He's an adult. He always weighs his every move. He thinks straight. He'll get by. They drove up to the police station. Our son is missing. The mother said, We've got a missing son. We want to file a report. How old is the child? Asked the officer on duty, without taking his head from filling out the log. 20. You what? The policeman immediately took his eyes off his notes. Are you kidding me? I don't understand you. Susan was taken aback by this strange reaction. The boy is an adult. The policeman grinned. Couldn't he go out with his friends or stay at a girl's house? Why are you panicking? We've got enough work to do without your great young man. Wait, he'll be back tonight. Maybe you shouldn't be so quick to file a report. Are you refusing to accept our application? Susan looked at him suspiciously. No. The desk clerk was embarrassed. Of course you write it, we'll take it. But what if you come back now and your son is already at home sleeping after a stormy night? What are you saying? The worried mother was indignant. Hunter would never do such a thing in his life. He doesn't drink at all and always warns me if he's going to be late. But this time he didn't. The young man remarked reasonably. He didn't. Susan agreed. But this is a special case. Please help us bring our son home. We've hurt him very much. He's proud. He'll never come back on his own. Don't worry, we'll find your boy. The officer on duty reread the statement, attached a photo. Stay at home. If he shows up on his own, let us know at once to call off the search. Parents rushed home. I wish I could. Susan spoke without blinking, staring at the road. I wish the children were home now. I wish that too. Samuel responded. We should think about where he could go. They went up to the apartment and opened the door, hoping to see their son. Didn't show up? The mother asked from the doorstep. Nancy shook her head negatively. Hunter's son. Susan went into the living room and sat down on the couch without undressing. Where are you? Mom? The daughter came to her mother, hugged her. Don't get upset. We'll get him off, you'll see. They sat together in the living room and waited for some news, but the phones were silent. Meanwhile, Hunter arrived at the bus station. Hello. I need a ticket to. He glanced at the tag and named the city. The woman behind the window looked at him curiously, asked for his passport, punched the receipt, and handed him the ticket. The bus is in 50 minutes, she informed him. The young man went into the station cafeteria, drank coffee, ate a couple of rolls, and wandered around the neighborhood. When he heard the boarding announcement, he got on the bus. Why? He thought to the peaceful whirring of the engine. Did my parents hide from me that I was not their own son? Why did they adopt me? And what will I say to my mother when I see her, and will I even be able to find her? What is she like? Maybe I should go back. Suddenly he thought, no. He said firmly to himself, I'm not going back. After what Nancy told me, I'll never go back. Turns out I didn't know her at all. How much resentment did she hold in her? He sighed sorrowfully. Soon fatigue and worry took their toll, and in a few minutes Hunter dozed off, sitting comfortably in his chair. Hey, boy! Hunter woke up to someone shaking him by the shoulder. Wake up, end of the line. The bus isn't going any farther. Get off, come on. Ah! The young man had barely recovered from his nap. Sorry, I'm getting off. He rubbed his face, finally throwing off the remnants of sleep, picked up his backpack, bag with laptop, and got off the bus. He looked back and walked down the street. "Excuse me," he stopped a woman passing by. "I'm looking for this man." He said his mother's name. "Do you happen to know where she lives? Camille?" "I do. Of course I do." She grinned, looking at the boy with interest. "Everyone here knows her. Can you tell me how I can find her? And who are you?" "Never mind. Just tell me where to find her." "Go down this street. After 2 houses, turn right and go to the end. There's your Camille." "Thank you." Hunter hurried toward the house where he thought his mother lived. "Hey, boy," the woman called out to him. "I'd think twice before making an acquaintance with someone like that if I were you." Hunter didn't answer anything, but walked to the given address. He was nervous for the upcoming meeting. The street was lined with well-built houses, and Hunter looked at them curiously. But the closer he got to the outskirts of the village, the slower his step became. The rich, well-kept houses were replaced by old, ramshackle huts, and Hunter stopped in front of one of them. Did someone really live here? The young man could not believe his eyes. A shriveled house among the tall and long ago not mown grass, the sun was reflected in the dirty blinded windows. On a shabby plaque nailed to the corner of the house, one could hardly see the number of the house. There was no doubt that this was the house he was looking for. Hunter opened the gate. With a hoarse barking, a chained dog jumped out of the booth. A neatly dressed, unshaven man came out. "What do you want?" "I'm looking for a stranger." Squinting into the sun, the man said, keeping his cigarette in his mouth. "I'm looking for Camille Clark. I was told she lives here." "Well, she does. But what do you want from her?" "She's my mom," Hunter said with one lip. The man dropped the cigarette from his mouth in surprise. "Camille, come here. Your son is looking for you." A couple of minutes later, a short woman came out on the porch. She was dressed in a stretched sweater, which was constantly coming off her shoulders, exposing a white t-shirt that had once been washed, a soiled robe sticking out from under the sweater, which reached her knees, worn barefoot. Trampled slippers completed the picture. She, fixing her dirty, disheveled hair, looked at the stranger attentively and spoke in a faltering tongue. "What are you doing, Bob? Have you eaten too much bleach?" "What son?" "I don't have one." She immediately shrieked and bent, having received a sensitive blow to the side from her roommate. "Come on in, boy." Hunter, the man, smiled broadly. "Your mother's sick. She's not thinking straight. And it's been a while. How old are you?" 20, replied Hunter, walking into the house. "She's been looking forward to seeing you, hasn't she, Camille?" He squeezed his friend's elbow warningly. Yes, agreed the woman, looking at her partner perplexed. "Come and sit down, and we'll set the table with your mother." Bob dragged Camille into the kitchen. "You almost ruined everything," he hissed at her. "Can't you see that? The kid's well dressed, so he must be from a rich family." "Well, he's not my son. I've never had kids." "Who cares now, stupid? If you're his mother's full namesake, we can capitalize on that resemblance. You know what I mean, dummy head." "But how?" "First of all, make up a sob story about why you had to give him up. We need to do everything we can to keep him here." "Why?" "We don't have enough to eat, and we've got an extra mouth to feed. He's a big boy. He needs to be fed." "What a fool you are. He's gonna feed us, so he can help his mommy a little. Now pretend to be a loving and suffering mother, a victim of human injustice. Go to him and pretend you've dreamed all your life of finding him." Hunter gingerly sat down on the worn sofa and looked around the room. How can anyone live here? He thought. Why is it so dirty? It's like our place. He thought involuntarily and then he stopped himself. There's no us. I'm on my own. What's your name, child? Camille appeared in the room. Hunter. The young man went up to meet her. Wow. The woman brushed away a tear. I dreamed of naming my son Hunter too. Apparently, God heard me and suggested this name to your foster parents. She walked over to the young man and took him into her arms. Son, how happy am I to see you? She pulled away from him, scrutinizing him. Tall, handsome, just the way I imagined you in my dreams. You have no idea how much I suffered for leaving you at the maternity hospital. But why? Hunter looked at her intently. Why did you leave me? Let's sit down. There is no truth in your feet. She sank down on the sofa beside her guest, folding her hands mournfully in her lap. I would never have given you up if it weren't for circumstances, son, she sobbed. I had no money to support you. Who was I? A young girl with no education, no steady job. Your father, when he found out I was pregnant, abandoned me. My parents conditioned me to leave the baby at the hospital or get the hell out. What could I do? I was almost as old as you are now. I'm sorry, son. She took his hands in hers and clung to them, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. Hunter felt them dripping down his arms. I'm very guilty before you. I'll never begrudge you forgiveness. Oh, come on, you. I understand different circumstances happen. I'm not angry with you. But now that you've found me, we'll never part again, will we? She looked hopefully at the young man. Yes, I'll stay with you, if I may. The woman hugged the boy. He wrinkled his nose, smelling the strong odor of booze and unwashed female body. He wistfully remembered the smell of his foster mother, always well-groomed, clean, and trim. Thank you, dear, for not giving up on me, for finding me. Now I'm not afraid to die, my blood. Dying? Why do you say that? I'm very sick. Camille sighed heavily. What about you? Is there anything I can do to help? You see, there's no work here. We get by on odd jobs, and my health isn't what it used to be, and I'm old. The employer wants someone younger. We don't even have anything to buy you. So let me go to the store now, suggested Hunter, rising to his feet. I have money. My darling son. Camille hugged the boy again. Thank you. We must celebrate your arrival. Bob? She called her roommate, who had been in the kitchen all this time. Take the boy to the store. Tell him what to buy for the table. By the time the men returned from the store, the woman had put the room in relative order. A mountain of unwashed dishes disappeared from the kitchen. The floor was washed. An old but clean bedspread appeared on the sofa. The table was shot with oilcloth. Here we are, Bob announced happily, putting 2 full bags of sundries on the table. Generous son of yours. Come on, mother, set the table. We'll celebrate his return to you. I've invited some friends of ours. Quietly, he said in the woman's ear. Is there a place to wash? Hunter asked hesitantly. I'm sweaty and dusty from the road. Bob laughed. We have a bathhouse, but we ran out of firewood last month, and we have no money to buy it. Tomorrow we'll agree with the neighbors. They'll heat the bathhouse. You'll wash yourself, and if you want, you can wash yourself with cold water, straight from the well. I'll bring a towel right away. Hunter, shivering from the cold, doused himself with water from the well, changed into a fresh t-shirt, and returned to the house. Sit down, son. Invited his mother. Don't be sorry what God has sent. We serve. Hunter sat at the table, listened to the conversations of adults, and saw how his mother's mood gradually improved, warmed by vodka. I see that you have fallen into a good family. She started talking. Lucky then. Don't look at me like this. I used to be beautiful, not drinking. I had a hard life, she cried. But when you drink, you feel better. And how I longed for you, she said, thinking all the time how my son was doing. And my son lived a good life. And now I'm like this, sick through and through. No job, no health. If it hadn't been for Bob, she'd have waved her hand and drunkenly hiccuped. I'd have died a long time ago. I can't work, and I need money for medicine, you know. If you could live with your mom for a while, Bob suggested. You could work, support her. We could get her health back on track. All right, I can stay late. I'm on my university vacation right now. While they were talking, the guests arrived. Here are our friends. Welcome to the new arrivals, Bob. This is Camille's son, here to visit. The man and woman said hello to Hunter, sat down at the table, and the conversation was immediately revitalized. See. Looking proudly at Hunter, Camille boasted, "What a handsome son I have grown up. I wasn't so bad when I was his age, but now." She cried, knocked back a shot of vodka. "Alone, nobody needs me. All hope for my son." "You don't know." The young man looked around at the already pretty tipsy company. "Where can I get a temporary job here?" "If only at the market, as a loader," answered the guest. "There is always a shortage of people there." "I agree. When do I start?" "Come tomorrow. I'll set you up with the market owner. But the work is hard." He hummed, incredulous, looking at the puny boy. "Can you do it?" "I can handle it." "Shall I lie down?" Hunter asked his mother, not boldly. He didn't call her by her name and patronymic. It was awkward, and he couldn't pronounce the word mom. "Oh, what am I, dummy head?" Camille got excited. "Come on, I'll make you a bed. You're tired from the road." She took the young man to the farthest room, where there was nothing else but an old rickety wooden bed and a couple of chairs. The woman made up the bed and left Hunter alone. It took him a long time to fall asleep, reliving over and over the events of the day. Drunken voices came from the kitchen. Then one of the men picked up a guitar, and everyone sang. The young man covered his head so he wouldn't hear the noise and soon fell asleep. "Hunter?" The boy woke up to the hoarse voice of the woman he thought was his mother. "It's time for you to go to work, Bob. Hurry up so you can have breakfast." Hunter quickly washed his face, ate the remains of last night's feast, and went with the man to get a job. "Here's your job." A sturdy man in his old age pointed at the crates of fruit. "Now the car will come. The forwarder will say what you need to load. The salary will depend on your The young man worked all day, taking only small breaks. His master praised him. "Well done. I'm pleased with you," he said to the boy in the evening, counting out the bills. "Here, you've earned it." Only Hunter went outside from the market gate when Bob ran up to him. "Hi." Sniffing his nose and occasionally looking around, said the man. "So, how was your first day?" "Fine," Hunter replied. "I'm a little tired. Now it would be good to have a snack, because I haven't eaten anything since morning." Yeah. Put your arm around his shoulders and said Bob. "I'll be right there. Mom's setting the table." Just then, he looked away again. "Let's go to the store. It's supposed to be paid from the first paycheck," he assured, noticing the young man's perplexed look. "And your mom's head hurts after yesterday. It needs to be fixed. Do you understand? You're a caring son, aren't you? You and I are going to go to the store." The man insistently pulled Hunter toward the store. "We'll buy what we need, and then we'll go home." At home, the company from yesterday was waiting for them. "Oh!" They greeted Hunter with shouts of joy. "Our breadwinner is here. The first paycheck should be properly celebrated," Bob announced, putting a bag full of vodka and snacks on the table. Well? Impatiently asked his mother. Show me how much you've earned. She looked greedily at the bills that the young man took out of his jacket pocket. You'll share it with your mother, right? Sure. The boy handed her almost all the money, leaving a small amount for himself. Here, thanks, of course, why you need money and me. She wept. I just need to buy some medicine. And again the house was noisy until midnight, until the hosts and guests fell asleep wherever they could, exhausted from drinking and eating. The next day everything was repeated. Hunter was silent, did not make a remark to his mother, did not try to chase the guests away. He went to work every day, and the company successfully drank and ate his earnings. The young man lost count of the days. More and more often he was overtaken by memories of that family, but he chased the thoughts away from himself, not allowing himself to regret for a moment the decision to leave home. Hunter, son, his mother called out to him one evening. He had just fallen into a peaceful sleep, giving rest to his body, tired from physical work. Get up. Some people are asking for you. What people? Reluctantly wiping his sleepy eyes and getting out from under the warm blanket, Hunter asked, Do I know? Go see for yourself. Camille took a firm step toward the hallway. Why are you here? Hunter asked rudely, seeing his foster parents in the hallway. Hunter. Susan's lips quivered when she saw her son, gaunt, in a laundered t-shirt, with long unwashed hair, barefoot. He was a pitiful sight. We need to talk. Why don't we go outside? Let's talk quietly, without witnesses. Son? Camille came out of the kitchen. Are you all right? Who are these people? What do they want from you? I'm fine, answered the young man and went out of the door and into the street. You came for nothing, he said firmly. I'll stay here. At least until classes start at the university. Son. Susan looked at him pleadingly. I'm not your son. He cut her off abruptly. You tricked me. Hunter, you're wrong. The father walked over to his son and took him by the shoulders. Look me in the eye. We had no intention of deceiving you. We just didn't find the right time to tell you everything, but we're not guilty of anything. There's nothing more to tell. Don't worry about it. I found my real mom, and I'm gonna stay with her and take care of her. You don't like the way she is. What can you do? You can't choose your parents. She needs me. It's my duty to stay by her side. Hunter. Stammering, Susan said in horror. Hey, boy. Bob came out on the porch, already pretty drunk. You need help. Are they trying to take you away? Don't give in. You get the hell out of our house. This is private property. Hunter. The woman closed her eyes for a moment to endure the drunken man's lunge. You're wrong to think this woman is your mother. Your mother died as soon as you were born. I know that for a fact. And if by blood I'm not really your mother, then you could call me a milk mother. I'm the one who breastfed you, and she's an imposter. No way. The young man turned cold, but everything coincided, even the village. She is just a full namesake of your mother, took advantage of the situation, fooled your head, convinced you that you are her son. We asked the neighbors. She's a long-time deep drinker. Your mom was a very nice woman. You're just like her. What does that make it? Hunter asked, shifting his gaze from Susan to Samuel. Were they using me? Unfortunately, it turns out that they did. But why? Son. Camille's head came out of the door again. We're waiting for you, darling. Is that true? The young man was at the woman's side in 2 leaps. Is what true? I don't understand. What are you talking about now? Camille was stunned. Is it true that you're not my mom? Did they tell you that? She nodded at the foster parents. You won't be able to lean on them. Susan remarked, "I knew his mother, and if I did." Camille arched her back and looked at Susan with contempt. "That I don't have the right to live like a white man for a while," she sobbed. "I want someone to take care of me too, at least someone but Hunter." She patted the young man's cheek. He recoiled sharply from her. He did it so touchingly. I loved being in the role of his mom. I am a very lonely person and need simple motherly happiness. Am I to be despised for that? Well, have you deceived me? Hunter boiled, "Just a little bit." Bob made it all up. "Yes, and I felt like a mother this month because I have no one." Tears showed in his drunken eyes. "We lived almost like a real family." That's mean. What do you know about mean?" She swayed. Hunter supported her. "I'm a miserable person, and even this month I loved you in my own way." You're a manipulator. Through Hunter. How could you take such a sneaky advantage of my trust? My goodness, how gentle we are." Camille snorted. "Hunter, shall we go home?" Susan looked at her son pleadingly. "Why do you need me?" "You have your own daughter, and you don't need me. I'm just a nuisance." "That's right." Camille clapped her hands. "Don't go with them. Stay with us. You're a stranger to them anyway. So what difference does it make where you live? We have fun here." "Don't listen to her, son." Susan didn't know what other arguments to make to convince him to go with them. "You've always been and will always be family to us. Daddy and I love you very much, and I love you very much too," finally confessed the young man. "Forgive me, I thought I was an extra in the family. Thank you for everything. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to me. I'm ashamed that I ran away from home without listening to you." Susan opened her arms. Hunter rushed to his mother. "We've been worried sick about you. Nancy's been worried sick about you." Kissing and hugging her son, the woman said. Samuel hugged them, and the three of them stood there until Susan realized what was going on. "What are we waiting for?" "Pack up, son. Let's go home. We don't have to stay here." Hunter quickly packed his things and got into the car. "Hey, boy," Bob shouted after him. "If you decide to run away from home again, know that you're welcome here." It was good to have all the misunderstandings behind him. Susan said, holding her son close to her, "We are together again." Nancy ran out into the hallway as soon as the front door slammed. "Hunter." She threw her arms around her brother's neck. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me the other day. I take it all back. You can hit me, but I'm sorry." "Okay, forget it." Hugging her, the young man said, "No, you say you forgive me." "I really miss you, I really do. I'm insanely ashamed of what I said. You are the best brother ever. I really wanted you to come back. Tell me you've forgiven me. I won't let you go until you do. I'm not angry with you." Hunter replied with restraint, "Forget everything I said to you. I'm very happy to have such a brother. I don't know what bug bit me then." Nancy held her brother's hands and looked guiltily into his eyes. "I've been so bad without you. There hasn't been a day this whole month that I haven't thought about you, scolded myself for my long tongue. And I missed you too, my parents. I'm disgusted at how I've lived all this time. I can't believe it's only been a month. It feels like a year." Guys, their parents hugged each other and looked at them with emotion. How great it is that we are all together again. Let's not remember the bad things. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Strange, who could it be? Opening the door, Samuel asked, "I hope it's not your so-called mom chasing after you." Everyone laughed, waiting to see who they would see when the door opened. "Good afternoon." A stubby, middle-aged man in a dark suit stood on the doorstep. "I'm looking for Hunter." He gave the young man's full name. "It's me." Hunter answered, confused. "And who are you?" "I don't know you." "My name is William. I'm a notary and a trustee of your grandfather, Christian." "What grandfather? There must be some mistake." Hunter looked back at his parents in confusion. "I don't have a grandfather by that name." "Dear William," Hunter was stopped by his mother. "Let's go into the living room." "Well, are we keeping the man in the hallway?" Everyone followed Susan into the room. "William?" The woman spoke again. "You said Hunter had a grandfather. Is that correct?" "No mistake. Christian, Hunter's paternal grandfather. He asked me to look for his grandson, which I did. I was also instructed to inform you." He addressed Hunter. "That the will gives you a 2-room apartment in the elite district of the city, I think it's a sin to refuse such an inheritance. Yes, this is the first I've heard of this grandfather." And yet, the man was persistent. "It's true. He lived alone for years, looking for you everywhere. It was only just before he died that he managed to track down his own grandson. Unfortunately, circumstances prevented him from doing so earlier. The search took too long." The boy grinned. "And where is the grandfather himself?" "It would be nice to have a look at him and make sure it's not a joke, because I've already found one false mother. I don't want to be disappointed again." "You won't be able to do that, because Christian died recently before the most important moment in his life, meeting his grandson. Believe me, he would have tracked you down long ago, even hired a private detective for this purpose, but there was too little information about you and your mother. He didn't immediately recognize that he had a grandchild. Moreover, even in the maternity hospital, your traces were lost, and then all sorts of bureaucratic obstacles prevented a quick search for you." "Sad, of course," coldly remarked the young man, "but I don't need anything from a complete stranger. I have people whom I consider my family, and him I have never seen in my life. Let it all stay that way. I do not need anything from him." "Son," his mother stopped him. "Listen to the man, please. We don't know why your grandfather didn't have a chance to contact you before. Surely there must be a reasonable explanation for this. Don't mind him, Mr. Notary. He's a little upset. We are ready to listen to you further. I have come to fulfill Christian's last will and testament." The man looked at Susan with gratitude for the support, and to give you a letter from him. He held out a sealed envelope to Hunter. "I'm glad that, at least now, my client's soul is at rest, and this is the address where you must come to inherit the estate. Do not delay with it. In 6 months we will formalize your inheritance, but already now you can use the apartment. So I'll be expecting you soon. The keys to the apartment are kept with me. And now let me digress." He bowed his head ceremoniously and left, leaving the whole family at a loss. "What are you frozen?" Nancy came out of her reverie for the first time. "Hurry up and get to the table. I've made a lot of food waiting for you. Let's celebrate Hunter's return. Leave the serious stuff for tomorrow." "Really?" Mother's cheerful. "It's been so long since we've been together. So much has happened lately. It's been overwhelming." "Hunter?" The father put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Maybe you should be alone. Read your letter. We'll understand. We won't take offense." "No." The young man shook his head, as if shaking off heavy thoughts. "I'll read it later. I want to try Nancy's food first. I hope she's not planning to poison me." "Oh, you!" The girl took a joking swing at her brother. "I tried my best, and you're laughing at me again." "At last we can hear our son again," smiled the father. "Children don't be naughty, as their mothers stop them as children. Indeed, it's time to go to the table. I have much to tell you," said Hunter, when the first cheer of his return had passed. "That's good. Susan rejoiced. I want to hear how you've been living all this time, how you came across this same false mom. If you could see, she turned to her daughter. What a shack your brother had to live in. I am deeply ashamed. Nancy was blushing to the roots of her hair. That I attacked you, Hunter. When I realized what I'd done, I was ready to fall through the ground. I really wanted you back. I mean, we've got the whole place on edge. Right, parents? We even got the police involved. Without them, we never would have known where to find you. Don't apologize. The young man smiled. I'm also good. Instead of waiting for you, Dad, Mom, and talk, I ran away from home, got angry like a girl, and I'm a grown man, could not curb emotions. It's unforgivable in me. He waved his hand guiltily. The most important thing is that we are together again. Susan looked fondly at the children, her husband. It was good that everything ended safely. Everyone had learned a life lesson. Now everyone knew everything. There should be no hard feelings. They sat up past midnight, talking, laughing, remembering stories from their childhood. We're sitting up too late, Mother realized. It's time, agreed Father. I'm tired from the road. Soon everyone went to their rooms, and Hunter was alone. He went to the window and stood looking at the distant, dark sky for a long time. Finally, he resolutely grabbed the envelope, opened it, and began to read. Dear grandson, Christian wrote, if you are reading this letter, it means that I am no longer alive, and I will never be able to see you. I won't recognize you as you have become. I won't be able to look you openly in the eyes, to justify myself to you for your son, your father, and for myself, to ask for forgiveness. I won't be able to tell you that I've thought of you every minute. Yes, grandson, my heart is full of unspent love and tenderness. How I long to hold you against my chest, to tell you that I persisted in searching and hoping to meet you for all 20 years. Believe me, I would have given everything just to see you, at least once, and then I would not be afraid to accept death. Where were you, grandfather? Hunter swallowed the lump stuck in his throat. Then the news that I was living in a foster home wouldn't have been so shocking to me. I wouldn't have developed a persistent sense of loneliness. He took a deep breath, regaining his composure, and continued reading again. I'm sure you would have understood me, but I guess it was God's will to punish me severely for failing to raise my son properly. He left your mother when he found out she was pregnant. He ran away like a coward, afraid of responsibility, and when he admitted that your mother had a son by him, I immediately rushed to look for her. But it was too late. She died in childbirth, and you were immediately adopted. Nobody wanted to tell me the last name of these people, covering themselves with the secrecy of adoption. I had to stop looking because my son fell into bad company and needed constant supervision. I did not teach him responsibility, did not instill in him an aversion to bad habits, did not immediately realize that except for himself, he loves no one else. He got addicted to drugs and burned out in a couple years. My wife, your grandmother, couldn't bear the grief and left after her son. I was ready to go after them, but the thought of you kept me going. Can't you imagine, grandson, what torture it was? To be alone with bitter guilt. If my son hadn't left Camille, she'd still be alive. I hired a private detective, but he didn't get on your trail right away. The golden time was irretrievably lost. Unfortunately, worries over the death of my wife and son, despair at not being able to find you, undermined my health. I know that I don't have long to live. That's why I'm writing this letter, to have time to say everything I wanted to say. Now that you know the truth about our family, maybe you will find a drop of sympathy in your heart, and someday you will forgive all of us for making you suffer. I pray to God that you will find in your new family the happiness that my foolish son has deprived you of. To help you in any way I can, I'm leaving you a small inheritance. My notary will take care of the arrangements. I hope you won't refuse to accept this gift. That's it, dear grandson. My heart acts for you every day. Farewell without a trace. I believe you will be happier than we are." Hunter tore himself away from the letter. For a long time he sat staring at one point, then he crumpled up the sheet of paper, threw himself on the bed and cried. He heard the door creak. He was inexpressibly ashamed of his weakness, but he could not stop. Tears were pouring from his eyes. Sonny! Susan crouched down beside him on the bed, stroked his head. "I'm so sorry you didn't get to meet your grandfather, but if he sent this letter, he loved you." Gradually the sobs dampened. Hunter, wiping his tears, sat down next to his mother. There was no one left of them. Still sobbing, he said, "They're all dead, you see. I'm the only one left." The door to the room creaked open again, and Nancy appeared. "You are not alone, for you have us," she said. "And we love you very much." She hugged her brother, tears welling up in her eyes from the tenderness overflowing her soul. "I know." Hunter smiled. "I love you all very much, too." Her daughter was followed into the room by her father. "But are you going to shed tears here? Hunter, it turns out, is a very desirable groom." He smiled. "Now that you have your own apartment, I hope you don't want to move out immediately." "We wouldn't like that very much." All three of them looked at the boy expectantly. "No." Hunter smiled, looking at them warmly. "You are my closest people, my real family, and I don't need another.